The knock came at 2 a.m. She already knew whose door it was. Brittany Ellis tightened the white apron over her black uniform and stopped breathing in the hallway. 29 years old, black, a housemaid inside the Kang mansion. Every dollar she earned went straight to her mother's rent. Behind that door waited Kang Jun-so, 33. They called him the Quiet One. A black dragon tattoo climbed the right side of his neck, disappearing under a collar that never came undone in public. Tonight the collar was undone. His tie hung loose on the desk, his jacket lay on the chair. He looked at her the way no boss should look at the woman who serves his coffee. Then he spoke. In 3 days his mother would host a gala, Korean heiresses, silk hanboks, cameras, and he wanted to walk in with a girlfriend on his arm. He handed her a long red gown, her exact size. She had never told anyone her size. Brittany sat on the edge of his bed, the white apron still tied at her waist, the dress folded across her knees like a sentence. Downstairs, a grandmother sipped tea behind a column and wrote something down. Upstairs, another woman was already sharpening her smile for the gala. And what Brittany decided to do next. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. Brittany carried the last silver tray down the east corridor before she noticed her own reflection in the black marble. She stopped. The woman in the marble was tired. The apron was still crisp because she had ironed it twice that morning, but the eyes above the apron had thinned into something narrower than yesterday. She kept walking. The Kang mansion was quiet at this hour. 2 in the morning did that to a house built for whispers. Chandeliers hung dimmed, the way Madame Haija preferred them after midnight, and the corridors smelled faintly of eucalyptus from the humidifiers the old grandmother insisted on. Brittany's low black shoes made almost no sound on the marble. She had learned in the first week which stones creaked. She avoided them now without thinking. She set the tray down at the service pantry. 2 porcelain cups, 1 saucer, the little jade spoon that Madame Okja liked but rarely used. She washed each piece by hand. The dishwasher was loud. Loud was not allowed at this hour. Her phone buzzed against her thigh through the apron pocket. She dried her hands. She read the message. Rent due in 6 days, nothing more. Her mother never wrote anything more. Brittany read it a second time and put the phone back in the pocket. 6 days meant she still had time. 6 days also meant she had less time than last month, when the message had come with 8. She finished the cups and turned off the pantry light. The corridor to the staff wing was long. She counted the doors on nights like this because counting kept her from thinking. 9 doors on the left, 7 on the right. The 10th on the left belonged to the master of the house, and she did not count that one. She had learned in the second week not to count that one. Her phone buzzed again. This time the vibration was different, shorter, a single pulse. She knew that pulse. It came from a number she had never saved and had never needed to save. She stepped into the alcove behind the flower arrangement and looked down at the screen. Come. 1 word, no punctuation. Kang Jun-so did not use punctuation. Brittany closed her hand around the phone until the case dug into her palm. She felt the shape of her own pulse against the plastic. She looked up at the ceiling, at the gilded corner where the security cameras did not reach because Madame Haija considered surveillance in the residential wing to be an insult to hospitality. She looked back down. She typed nothing. She never typed anything. He would know she had read it, and that was enough for him. She walked to the 10th door on the left. The rent was 6 days out. Her mother was 61 and had a bad hip. The insurance had denied the surgery a second time last Tuesday. Brittany had sent an extra $400 that week from her own emergency envelope, and the envelope was thinner now than she liked to look at. She stopped 1 step from the door. She breathed in through her nose and out through her mouth, the way Naomi had taught her the first month. Naomi said it slowed the heart. It slowed nothing tonight. Her hand hovered over the wood. She let it hover. In that pause, she did the math she always did in that pause. A month of hidden risk against a month of paid rent. A month of Madame Haija's polite ignorance against a month of her mother's roof. A month of the quiet man on the other side of the wood against a month of the loud collection agency her mother had begun to hang up on. The math was always the same. The math was why the door was going to open. She raised her knuckle and tapped once. The door opened before her knuckle came away. Jun-so stood in the frame. The tie was gone. The vest was gone. The white shirt hung open at the throat by 2 buttons, and the dragon on the right side of his neck showed clearly under the reading lamp behind him. The tattoo curled from behind his ear to the collarbone, black ink coiled in a single unbroken line, and the ink caught the lamp for a second before he stepped back to let her in. She walked in with her hands folded in front of the apron. The room was not what people imagined when they imagined the private quarters of a man like Kang Jun-so. There were no gilded mirrors. There was no bar cart. There was a bed made in white linen so tight the corners looked cut. 1 leather armchair by the window, 1 low table with a single book and a single glass of water, and a wardrobe of pale ash wood that did not shine. The window overlooked the west garden. The curtains were drawn. He closed the door behind her. She turned to face him. She kept her hands folded. She kept her chin level. She had learned in the 3rd week not to lower her chin here. "Sit," he said. She did not sit. She never sat on the first word. He never repeated it. That was their arrangement. He walked past her, close enough that she smelled cedar and the faint metallic trace of the gun oil that clung to everything in this room, even after he had washed his hands. He crossed to the low table and picked up the glass of water. He drank half of it. He set it down. He did not look at her when he spoke. "The gala is in 3 days." Brittany's hands stayed folded. "I know," she said. 2 words. She had learned 2 words was the safe number here. "You will be there." Her fingers pressed once into the back of her right hand and released. That was all the reaction she permitted. Housemaids attended galas. Housemaids poured wine. Housemaids stood behind chairs and refilled water. She had been at the last gala. She had been at the one before that. There was nothing in the sentence yet that required a reaction. "I know," she said again. He turned then. His eyes found hers, and for the first time she saw the corner of something in him she had not seen in 7 months. Not softness, something narrower than softness. A decision already made and now delivered. "Not with the staff," he said. She did not move. "I will introduce you to my mother," he said, "as the woman I have been seeing." The room did the thing rooms do when the floor stops feeling like a floor. Brittany kept her chin level because her chin knew how to keep itself level even when the rest of her did not. She looked at him. She looked at the water glass. She looked back at him. "Mr. Kang," she said. "Jun-so," he said. "Mr. Kang," she said again. He did not correct her a second time. He walked to the wardrobe. He opened the left door. He lifted out a garment bag of pale gray linen and laid it across the foot of the bed. He unzipped the bag from the top down in a single motion. The dress inside was red. Not red like a warning. Red like a decision. Long, flowing, the shine of a silk that had been chosen because it caught candlelight instead of chandeliers. The neckline was cut with the kind of restraint that cost more than the flash of any plunge. The waist was tailored to a shape he could not have measured by looking, and yet the shape on the hanger was hers. He did not point at the dress. He looked at her. "Try it on," he said. "Not now. In your room, it will fit." Brittany's throat did something small and involuntary. She swallowed against it. "How do you know it will fit?" she said. "I know." She looked at the dress. She looked at him. She looked at the dress again. Her fingers had begun to tremble at the seam of the apron, and she pressed her thumb hard against the side of her forefinger to stop them. "Why?" she said. He answered her, and he did not hurry the answer. "Because in 3 days," he said, "my mother is going to bring 7 Korean heiresses into this house and place them in a line and ask me to choose. And I have already chosen. And the woman I have chosen is not standing in that line. She is standing in this room." The apron felt heavy suddenly, every stitch of it, the starch of it, the little white collar at her throat, the tie at the small of her back, that Naomi had double knotted at 7 that evening, because Brittany had been shaking too much from a phone call with the insurance office to knot it herself. "Mr. Kang," she said. "Jun-so. Jun-so." He did not smile. He did not soften. He only exhaled once, slowly, the way a man exhales when he has been holding something for weeks and has decided to set it down. "I am not asking you to marry me," he said. "I am not asking you to love me. I am asking you to walk in on my arm. 3 hours, 1 night." Brittany's eyes went to the dress, to the fold of the silk where it draped over the linen, to the tiny label sewn at the inside seam the size printed there and a black number she recognized before she could stop recognizing it. 3 hours, she said. 3 hours. And after. After we speak. She looked at him and she felt the math starting again. The math she always did. The rent, the mother, the hip, the insurance, the envelope. And now the dress. And now the 3 hours. And now the woman on his arm. The math was not the same anymore. The math had changed shape. She sat down. She sat down on the edge of the bed with the apron still tied, and the small white collar still fastened at her throat, and her low black shoes still on the marble floor. She sat because her legs had made the decision without asking her. She put her hands flat on her knees. She looked at the dress 2 feet from her thigh. She did not cry the way people cry in this kind of house, with sound, with performance. She cried the way housemaids cry, which is to say she cried without moving her face. 2 lines of water down her cheeks and no sound. Her chin stayed level, her hands stayed on her knees. Junso did not move. He stood by the wardrobe and he watched her cry the way she had learned to cry, and he did not offer her a tissue and he did not offer her a word. He waited. He had learned, over 7 months of tea trays and folded newspapers and the sound of her shoes not creaking on the stones she had memorized, how to wait for her. After a long time she wiped one cheek with the back of her hand. She wiped the other with the palm. She lifted her face. "Why me?" she said. He did not answer her right away. He walked across the room, past the bed, past the dress, and he crossed to the window. He drew the curtain back 1 inch with 2 fingers. He looked out at the garden he did not need to look at. He closed the curtain again. "Because you are the only person in this house," he said, "who has ever looked at me and not seen the name." Brittany closed her eyes. She kept them closed for 4 breaths. She counted them. She had learned to count breaths in the first week, the same way she had learned to count doors. She opened them. 3 hours, she said. 3 hours. And the staff. Naomi already knows. Her head lifted at that. Naomi. She has known for 2 weeks. He looked back at her. She has been helping me. Brittany looked at him, and something in her chest did a thing it had not done in 7 months. It was not warmth. It was not fear. It was the specific, small, almost forgotten sensation of not being alone in a plan. "She measured me," Brittany said. "She measured you. The night I was sick, she brought me broth. She measured me. She measured you." Brittany looked at the dress again. She stood up. She stood the way she always stood after being seated in this house. Chin level, hands smoothing the apron, the practiced small return of the body to service. She walked to the garment bag. She lifted the corner of the silk between her thumb and her forefinger and felt the weight of it. Real silk, heavy silk, the kind of silk that fell when it fell and did not float. 3 days, she said. 3 days. My mother's rent is in 6. He looked at her for a moment before he understood what she had told him. When he understood, his jaw shifted once. He walked to the low table. He opened the single drawer under it. He took out an envelope of thick, pale paper. He closed the drawer. "This is not payment for the 3 hours, he said. He held the envelope out. She did not take it. "This is the 6 months of rent I should have paid you as a signing bonus when you came into this house," he said, and did not. "Take it. Do not confuse it with the dress. The dress is separate." She looked at the envelope. She looked at him. Her hand rose slowly and closed around the paper. The paper was warmer than she expected because he had been holding it. "Mr. Kang," she said. "Jun So. Jun So." She held the envelope against the apron. She held the silk between 2 fingers of the other hand. She stood between the 2 objects in the $200,000 bedroom of a man whose name made grown men lower their eyes at dinner, and for the second time in 10 minutes the math in her head refused to look the way it had always looked. She folded the envelope once and slid it into the inside pocket of the apron, the deep one Naomi had sewn her for tips that never came. She let the silk fall back into the bag. She turned to face him one last time before the door. "Naomi covers my rounds tomorrow," she said. It was not a question. She was already deciding. "Naomi covers your rounds tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after, and the morning of, and the morning of." She nodded once. "Then I will be there," she said. She walked to the door. She put her hand on the handle. She stopped with the handle half turned, and she looked back over her shoulder at him. If your mother throws me out of the house, she said, in front of the guests. What then? He looked at her from the foot of the bed. The dragon on his neck did a small thing in the lamplight when he tilted his head. She will not throw you out. You do not know that. I know it. How? He held her look and he answered her in the voice that never rose above the level at which he had spoken from the moment she walked in. Because my grandmother will not let her. Brittany's hand tightened on the handle. She had crossed Madame Okja 3 times a day for 7 months. She had brought her the 2 a.m. tea Madame Okja pretended to want, because Junso would not drink his, and Brittany was the only one Madame Okja trusted, to add the exact half-spoon of honey the doctor had permitted. She had never once, in 7 months, spoken more than 4 words to the old woman at a time. She had never been sure the old woman had seen her at all. She sees you, Junso said, as if he had heard her think it. She has always seen you. She sees more than any of us. Brittany opened the door. She stepped out into the corridor. She closed the door behind her without letting it click. She walked back down the corridor, past the flower arrangement, past the alcove, past the 9 doors on the left she had counted on the way in. She did not count them now. She could feel the envelope against her hip through the apron pocket, and she could feel, further down, deeper than the envelope, a second weight that had not been there when she walked past those doors the first time. The weight of a decision she had not decided, but had accepted. The weight of a red dress 2 rooms behind her that a man had bought in her exact size before she had known he had known it. She reached the service pantry. She did not turn on the light this time. She stood in the dark with her back against the counter, and she pulled her phone out of the apron pocket. She opened her mother's message. Rent due in 6 days. She stared at it. She typed 1 line, and then she erased it. She typed another line, and then she erased it. She typed a 3rd line, and she looked at it for a long time before she sent it. Sent an extra 6 months. Get the surgery. The message went. The screen showed the little check mark. She locked the phone. She slid it back into the apron pocket. Then she did the small thing housemaids in the Kang mansion do at the end of every shift. The small thing she had done every night for 7 months without thinking. She untied the apron. She folded it once, twice, 3 times, into the perfect white square that Madame Hayaja preferred. She placed the square on the counter of the pantry to be laundered before morning. She stood there in the black dress alone. She looked down at herself. The black dress without the apron, the dress underneath the dress, the uniform under the uniform. Her hands hung at her sides now with nothing to fold and nothing to hold, and she looked at them the way a person looks at their hands when they have just agreed to something they cannot yet see the shape of. Naomi came out of the dark from the far end of the pantry then. Brittany did not startle. She had known. Somewhere in the last minute she had known. Naomi walked to her without hurry. She stopped in front of her. She was still in her own uniform, the same black and white as Brittany's, her medium box braids pulled back into the low bun she always wore for the night shift, the small gold hoops in her ears catching the light from the corridor. Naomi looked at Brittany's face. You went, Naomi said. I went. He told you. He told me. The dimple appeared in Naomi's left cheek before her mouth did. Girl, Naomi said, sit down before you fall down. Brittany did not sit down. She looked at Naomi for a long moment, at the friend she had not known she had until this moment, at the friend who had measured her for a dress under the cover of a bowl of broth, and she felt her mouth do the smallest thing it had done in 7 months. Naomi, she said. Yeah, you measured me. I measured you. He told you why. He told me why. Brittany's hand went to the apron pocket where the envelope was. He gave me 6 months of rent. I know. You knew. I told him what to give you. He was going to make it 3. Brittany looked at her. Naomi looked back. The corridor was still quiet. The house was still asleep. Somewhere on the 3rd floor, Madame Okja was almost certainly awake, because Madame Okja was always almost certainly awake at this hour, and Brittany understood for the first time what that meant. Naomi, Brittany said. Yeah. In 3 days I am going to walk down that staircase in a red dress. Naomi did not answer for a moment. Then she reached out and she took Brittany's hand in hers. She squeezed once. She let go. In 3 days, Naomi said, you are going to walk down that staircase in a red dress, and every single person in that ballroom is going to remember your face for the rest of their lives. Brittany looked at her. Naomi turned toward the service stairs. She stopped at the first step. She looked back over her shoulder. "Get some sleep, Brittany," she said. "You are going to need it." She went up the stairs. Brittany stood alone in the pantry a moment longer. She looked down the dark corridor toward the 10th door on the left. She looked up at the ceiling where no camera had ever been placed. She looked, finally, at her own hand, at the palm she had pressed into her thigh when she read the word, "Come," on her phone 24 minutes earlier. The palm was steady now. She turned toward the service stairs and she began to climb. On the second landing, she paused. Her legs had been steady in the pantry. Her legs were less steady here. She put her hand flat on the wall to remember how walls worked. The wall was cool. The paint was fresh. Madame Haija had the staff wing repainted every spring because she believed peeling walls were an insult to the women who lived inside them. Brittany had always liked her for that small thing, and she liked her a little less for it now, because the woman who painted the walls of her housemaids was the same woman who would look at a black woman in a red dress on her son's arm and decide, in one glance, whether to laugh or to strike. She kept climbing. Her room was on the 4th floor at the end of the corridor, the smallest of the 6 staff rooms, the one with the window that looked over the service courtyard instead of the garden. She had chosen it herself. Naomi had told her the garden view was better, and Brittany had said the courtyard view was quieter, and Naomi had understood without being told that quiet cost less than a view, and Brittany could not afford a view. She opened the door. She closed it behind her. She turned the small brass key in the lock the way she always did, because a housemaid in a house of men she did not know is a housemaid who locks her door. She stood in the dark of her room with her back against the wood. She did not turn on the lamp. She walked to the narrow bed. She sat down on the edge of it. She reached into the apron pocket that was no longer an apron pocket because the apron was folded on the pantry counter 3 floors below, and she remembered that the envelope had gone into the pocket of the black dress under the apron, and she reached into that pocket instead, and she took out the envelope and she put it on the pillow beside her. She looked at it in the almost dark. She did not open it. She did not need to open it. He had told her what was inside and she had believed him, and she was not going to spoil the belief by counting. She lay back on the bed with her black shoes still on. She looked at the ceiling. The ceiling had a small water stain in the corner that Madame Hayoja had promised to have fixed 6 weeks ago. She had almost stopped seeing it. Tonight she saw it again, because tonight she was seeing everything. She closed her eyes. She did not sleep. She let herself lie there for a long, uncounted time, and somewhere in that time her hand found her own wrist and pressed a thumb against her own pulse, and she felt the beat of the woman she had been at 7 that evening, and the beat of the woman she was going to be in 3 days, and the beats were not the same. 3 floors up, in a bedroom no housemaid had ever entered without knocking, an old woman in a low ceremonial bun was already smiling into her cup of tea. She had been smiling into it for the last 4 minutes. She lowered the cup to the saucer. She looked at the door. She spoke a single soft sentence to the empty room, in Korean, in the tone she used only when she had decided something none of her children would learn until it was already done. Then she set the cup down and she waited for morning. Brittany was on the 2nd floor landing at 5:30 in the morning when Junso came down the corridor without a sound. She had a folded stack of clean linen against her hip and a small brass keyring at her belt. He stopped 1 step above her. His collar was open. The dragon showed. "Kitchen," he said. "Now." She followed him down the service stairs. The mansion was still dark, only the low sconces glowing along the wainscoting. He walked ahead of her, the way a man walks who has never once looked to see if anyone is behind him. In the kitchen, he pointed at the copper kettle. She filled it. She set it on the flame. "Sit," he said. She kept standing. The apron string cut into her waist where she had tied it too tight in the dark. "Sit," he said again. She sat. The chair was oak, cold under the thin cotton. He remained on his feet and watched the flame climb the base of the kettle. "Tomorrow," he said, "you begin to leave the room I put you in at 8. Sir. You leave through the side stair. Naomi meets you at the pantry. She has a second apron for you already pressed. My grandmother wakes at 6 and reads the newspaper in the east parlor. She is a small woman with a jade ring. If she looks at you, you look back." Brittany laced her fingers on top of the apron so they would not tremble. "Not once did anyone in this house tell you to lower your eyes," he said. "That was you." The kettle shivered. He lifted it before it whistled. He poured the water himself. 2 cups. He set one in front of her, and one in front of the chair opposite hers, and then he pulled that chair out and sat down. "Drink," he said. She drank. It burned. She kept drinking. He watched her over the rim of his own cup. 3 days, he said. You need to know the shape of this house from the inside, not from a service corridor. My mother will introduce herself to you as if she has never seen you. Do not correct her. My grandmother will pretend not to remember your face. That is a test. You will pass by doing nothing. Sir, what am I to them? My guest. And to you. He set the cup down. Whatever you decide, at the gala, is what I will honor. She looked at the kettle. The water was still ticking inside it. She thought about the rent envelope she had already sealed for the 12th. She thought about her mother sitting at the small window in Baltimore, waiting for the money order like waiting for rain. Naomi knows, she said. Naomi has known since Tuesday. Grandmother Okeja. He did not answer that one right away. He turned the cup a quarter turn on the wood. Then he said, She has her own map of this house. Do not lie to her. If she asks a direct question, tell her the truth. Even the red dress. Especially the red dress. Something opened in her chest. Not relief. A door she had thought was locked simply not being locked. She drank the rest of the tea because she did not know what to do with her hands. Junso stood. He picked up both cups and set them in the sink himself. She had never seen a man of this house touch the sink. He turned the tap for 2 seconds, no more. Go, he said. You have 3 hours before the household wakes. Sleep. She stood. She smoothed the apron. At the door she stopped. Why me? He was already halfway to the service stair. He did not turn around. Because you looked at me on the first day, he said. In the front hall. For 1 second, and then you kept walking. She did not sleep. She lay on the narrow bed in the maid's quarters with her uniform still on, and stared at the crack in the plaster over the window. Somewhere in the house, a clock struck 6. She heard Naomi come in through the pantry door 2 floors below, humming something low and Baptist. At 7, she was standing at the sideboard in the east parlor with a silver coffee service. Okeja was already there. The old woman was small in the tall wing chair, the newspaper spread across her lap, the jade ring flashing when she turned a page. Girl, Okeja said, without looking up. Come here. Brittany came. The tray trembled once and then stopped trembling. Pour. Brittany poured. Okeja watched the stream, not the cup. You have steady hands for a girl who did not sleep, Okeja said. Ma'am? My grandson takes 2 sugars in the morning and none at night. Did you know that? No, ma'am. You will. Okeja folded the newspaper. She lifted the cup with both hands, the way a nun lifts a chalice. There is a woman coming to this gala on Friday. Her name is Choi Da-eun. She is a beautiful mistake 3 families have been trying to make since my grandson was 25. Do you understand what I am telling you, girl? I think so, ma'am. Then hold the tray higher. You are a good height. Use it. Brittany lifted the tray 1 inch. Okeja smiled without showing teeth and waved her off. In the pantry, Naomi was already waiting with an extra apron folded over her arm and both eyebrows halfway to her hairline. She talked to you, Naomi whispered. She talked to me. Lord. Lord what? Lord, that woman has not talked to a housemaid in 11 years. Not since the last one broke a Ming bowl and cried in the wrong hallway. Naomi shoved the extra apron into Brittany's hands. Put this in your locker. If the mother comes down before I get to the linen room, drop a spoon. Drop a spoon. Any spoon. On purpose. She hates the sound. She will leave the room. That is your window. Brittany laughed once, short. It surprised her. Naomi did not laugh back. Naomi was already gone through the swinging door with the breakfast tray for Madame Hayaja. They ran the day like that. Brittany served, cleared, folded, carried, and every 7th minute Naomi appeared in a doorway with a small signal. A tilted chin meant Haja was coming down the north stair. 2 fingers on the doorframe meant Okeja was awake in a room she was not supposed to be awake in. A palm flat against the wall meant Junso was on the phone in his study and would not be moving for at least a quarter of an hour. At 11, Brittany walked past the library, and Junso was inside with the door open 6 inches. He was on a call in Korean, low and clipped. He saw her through the crack and lifted one finger without breaking the sentence. She stopped in the corridor with a stack of pressed napkins against her stomach. He finished the sentence, hung up, and stepped into the doorway. "Tonight," he said. 11. My rooms. Bring the fitting." She nodded. "Naomi cannot cover the third-floor corridor after 10. Byung-chul walks it every 40 minutes. She nodded again. "You know the linen closet by the north window?" "Yes. That is your route." He closed the door. She kept walking. The napkins on her stomach were warm from her own body heat. The rest of the day she was two women. One was the housemaid who curtsied when Hija swept through the drawing room with her phone against her ear, talking to a florist about tuberoses. The other was a woman with a red dress hanging on the back of a chair in a locked room upstairs. She kept both women in separate rooms of her head. She did not let them meet. At 3:30, Okja rang the bell in the sunroom. Brittany went. Okja was alone with a jigsaw puzzle of a Dutch harbor spread on the low table, 3/4 done. "Sit," Okja said. Brittany sat on the floor across the table, because she could not sit on the silk sofa in a work uniform. "Find me the corner pieces with the little yellow flag," Okja said. "My eyes are 60 years past corners." They worked in silence for 10 minutes. Brittany found 4 flag pieces. Okja fitted 2 of them without looking up. "My grandson does not sleep," Okja said. "Did you know that?" "I have heard him walk, ma'am. He walks because he does not sleep. He does not sleep because for 11 years he has been the wall this family stands behind." Okja pressed a corner piece in. "A wall does not get to lean on anything. Girl, look at me." Brittany looked up. Okja's eyes were sharp and amused and not unkind. "If you are lying to me about who you are in this house, tell me now, and I will send you to Baltimore tonight with a check large enough that your mother will never rent again. There is no shame in that door. It is a real door." Brittany's mouth was dry. "I am not lying, ma'am." "Then find me the piece with the seagull." Brittany found the seagull. Okja fitted it. The old woman leaned back into the silk cushions and folded her thin hands on her lap, the way people fold a letter they have already read. "Good," Okja said. "Go. Tell Naomi she may stop signaling the 3rd floor. I will keep Byung-chul busy after 10 tonight. Tell her exactly that." Brittany stood. Her knees cracked. Okja's eyes flicked to the sound and back to the puzzle without comment. At the pantry, Naomi listened, blinked twice, and set down the ladle. She said what? "Byung-chul after 10. She will handle him." Naomi crossed herself, which was a thing she only did in earnest twice a year. "That woman has been running this house since before the mother was born. If she is on our side, sweetheart, we are on a bigger game than we thought." Our side. Our side. At 11 that night, Brittany went up through the linen closet by the north window with the folded garment bag over her arm. The dress was heavier than she expected. Junso opened the door before she knocked. He had taken the jacket off. The white shirt hung open at the neck, 1 button lower than in the morning. He locked the door behind her without a sound. "Put it on," he said. "Behind the screen." She put it on behind the screen. Her fingers shook once at the zipper. She took a breath and finished. When she stepped out, he was standing by the window with his hands in his pockets and his back to her. He turned only when she spoke. "It fits." He looked at her for 4 seconds. He walked over. He lifted the strap on her right shoulder 1/2 inch and let it fall. He tilted his head. "Turn," he said. She turned once. Slow. Again. She turned again. When she stopped, his face had done something she could not read. He stepped back. "Grandmother will love it," he said. "That is a problem for Choi Da-yoon, not for us. Take it off. Fold it inside the bag with the tissue on the outside. Naomi will move it to my mother's guest suite tomorrow at 4. You will change into it in that suite on Friday, not in the maid's quarters." "Sir." "Jun-so." She lifted her eyes. "Jun-so." He held her gaze 1 second longer than a man is supposed to hold the gaze of a woman he has not touched. Then he opened the door for her himself. In the corridor, Byung-chul was nowhere. From the far end of the wing, from Okja's suite, came the small, clear sound of a television turned up 1/2 a notch too loud. Brittany walked back to the maid's quarters with the folded bag against her chest. She did not run, she did not slow. When she passed the tall clock at the head of the stair, it read 11:22, and she felt, for the first time in 9 months of service, that the house had shifted 1 degree in her direction. She slept 4 hours. It was more than she had slept in a week. Thursday came in bright and cold. At 8:15, the family took coffee together in the morning room, which they had not done together in 3 years, because Junso had asked Hyeja on Wednesday night to arrange it. Brittany learned this from Naomi, who learned it from the driver, who learned it from Byung-chul, who did not know why he had been told to be present. Brittany carried the coffee service in on the porcelain tray. Okja was already seated in the small chair by the fireplace. Hyeja was on the settee with her back straight and her burgundy silk sleeve draped over the armrest. Junso stood at the mantel with his coffee already in his hand and the tie still loose from his study. Han Mi-sun stood behind Hyeja with the silver tablet held against her ribs. Brittany moved through them as air. She poured Okja first. 2 sugars, because Okja had watched her the day before and would notice. She poured Hyeja second. Black, 1 dash of cream from the side. "Mother," Junso said. "Friday night." "Yes." "I am bringing a woman." Hyeja set her cup on the saucer without a sound. "You are bringing a woman." "Yes." "Which woman?" "You will meet her on Friday." Han Mi-sun's thumb moved twice on the tablet. "Junso," Hyeja said, "this is not a small thing. Every family from Busan to Bergen County will be in this house on Friday." "I know. The Choi girl is coming. Her father is coming. The Choi girl is coming because you have not answered her father in 8 weeks." "I know. Then who?" "You will meet her on Friday." Okja lifted her cup with both hands and drank slowly, watching the room over the rim the way a woman watches a stage. Brittany moved to the sideboard to refill the small pitcher. Her back was to the family. Her hands were absolutely steady on the silver. "Han Mi-sun," Hyeja said. "The seating chart." "Ma'am." "Move whoever is on my son's right and put an empty chair there. I will need to see the name Friday morning, not before." "Ma'am." Okja set her cup down with a small click. "Hyeja," she said. "Mother, let the boy have his chair." The room went very quiet. Hyeja looked at her mother-in-law. Okja was already looking at the fire. Junso drank his coffee. Brittany turned around with the fresh pitcher and refilled Okja's cup without being asked. Okja did not look at her. Okja looked at Hyeja and waited. "Fine," Hyeja said finally. "An empty chair. 2 more thing," Okja said, still watching the fire. "Do not put the Choi girl on his left. Put her at the far end of the table between the Archbishop and the man from the Seoul consulate. She will hate it. That is not our problem." Hyeja's mouth thinned. She said nothing. She lifted her cup. Okja finally turned her head half an inch and smiled at Brittany. "More cream, dear," Okja said, though there was already cream. Brittany added cream. Then she carried the tray out. In the corridor, she leaned against the wall for 4 seconds. She heard the small murmur of the room resume behind the closed door and knew, without hearing the words, that the game had just changed shape. Naomi was in the pantry pretending to polish a spoon. "Well," Naomi whispered. "An empty chair," Brittany said. Naomi's eyes filled with something that was not tears and not laughter and could have been either. "Sister," she said, "that old woman is a general." Through the pantry window they could hear Byung-chul on the driveway giving orders to 2 men about the flowers. From the ballroom came the small tap of Chang-su's ladder as he adjusted the last chandelier chain. The house was full of moving parts, and Brittany, standing there with the empty tray against her hip and the taste of Okja's coffee still in the back of her throat, felt for the first time that she was one of them. She looked at Naomi. Naomi looked back. 26 hours, Naomi said. Brittany nodded. "Sister," Naomi said, "you tell me right now, do you want out? There is still a train. I will walk you to the gate myself, and Okja will pay for the ticket without blinking." Brittany thought about her mother in Baltimore. She thought about the rent envelope already mailed. She thought about the man at the mantel who had turned the coffee cup a quarter turn and said, "Whatever you decide is what I will honor." She thought about a red dress folded in tissue in a guest suite on the 2nd floor. "No," she said. "You are sure?" "I am sure." Naomi set the spoon down. "Then get back out there. Chang-su needs the middle chandelier held while he ties off the chain." Brittany went. She held the ladder for Chang-su for 11 minutes without saying a word. When he came down, he touched his cap to her, the way a man touches his cap to a woman he has decided, quietly, to consider his equal. It was the smallest thing that had happened to her in that mansion in 9 months. She carried it up the service stair with her like a coin in her pocket. At 4 in the afternoon, a black car came up the drive with Choi Da-in's initials engraved on the plate frame. She was not expected until Friday. She had come a day early. Brittany was in the front hall arranging the last of the tall vases when Byung-chul opened the door. Da-bun stepped in with a small dog under one arm and a garment bag over the other. Her hair was cut to the collarbone in a single blade. Her mouth was already painted for the evening. She looked at Brittany the way a buyer looks at furniture she is thinking of removing. "Where is Madame Kang?" Da-won said. "The morning room, ma'am." "Take the dog." Brittany took the dog. It was small and hot and shaking. Da-won walked past her without another word, heels ringing on the marble. Han Mi-sun materialized at the top of the stair with the silver tablet already open, and the two women greeted each other with the small, polite bow of people who had rehearsed this arrival 6 weeks ago. Brittany carried the dog to the pantry. Naomi looked at the dog. Naomi looked at Brittany. "A day early," Naomi said. "A day early." Her father called her. "Byung-chul told me an hour ago, and I did not want to say it until we knew." Naomi took the dog and set it in a padded basket by the warm oven. The dog stopped shaking. "She is here to walk the ballroom before Friday. She wants to know where her chair is." Okja moved her chair. "Okja moved her chair," Naomi said. "But Okja is on the second floor with the door closed and a book she is not reading. She is going to let that woman find the seating chart in Han Mi-sun's tablet. She wants the tantrum tonight instead of tomorrow." Brittany set her hand on the doorframe. "Naomi. Sister. I want to see her walk the room." "You want to see her?" "I want to know the face." Naomi thought for one breath, then she nodded once. "Polish the sconces in the ballroom. Take your time. Do not look at her twice." Brittany went. She polished the sconces along the north wall of the ballroom with a soft yellow cloth. She heard Da-yoon before she saw her. The fast heels, the clipped Korean to Han Mi-sun, the way she said the word chair like a knife against a glass. Da-yoon came in through the main doors, walked the perimeter of the parquet once, stopped at the head table. "Where?" Da-yoon said. Han Mi-sun answered in Korean, low and neutral. Brittany did not need the translation. She saw Da-yoon's chin lift a quarter inch and her mouth tighten and her hand close, slowly, on the small red clutch under her arm. "By whose order?" Da-yoon said. Han Mi-sun answered. Da-yoon turned her head then and looked directly at Brittany across the ballroom. It was the second time in one afternoon a woman of this house had chosen to look at her instead of past her. This look was different. This look measured her from the crown of her head to the low black shoes and stopped for 1 second at the apron string. "You," Da-yoon said, in English. "Girl, come here." Brittany came. She kept the cloth folded in her palm. She stopped 4 feet away from the table. "Do you know who I am?" "You are Miss Choi, ma'am." "Do you know why I am in this house?" "To attend the gala tomorrow evening, ma'am." Da-yoon smiled with only her mouth. "You have a soft voice for a girl who works in a house this large. Are you also the one who serves the head table?" "I do not know yet, ma'am. Madame Han has not told me my station." "Ah," Dasun looked at Han Mi-sun. Han Mi-sun did not look back. Dasun looked at Brittany again. "If they put you at the head table, girl, pour my wine before his coffee. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am." "Go." Brittany went. She did not run. She walked the length of the ballroom at the same steady pace she had walked in, and when she passed under the middle chandelier she looked up once, for 1 second, and Chang-soo, still on the ladder tightening a bracket, met her eye and gave her the smallest nod a man can give and still call it a nod. She was in the corridor before her hands began to shake. She pressed both palms flat against the wallpaper and waited them out. It took 10 seconds. Then she walked back to the pantry. Naomi read her face in one glance. "She saw you." "She saw me. She said something. She said pour her wine before his coffee." Naomi laughed once. It was not a warm laugh. "That woman does not know what she just did." "What did she do?" "She told the whole staff, without knowing it, that she is afraid of you. A woman only marks a maid when she is afraid of that maid. Sister, by tomorrow morning every single person in this house will have heard that Miss Choi noticed you. That is the mistake she cannot take back." "Naomi." "Sister, I am afraid." Naomi took Brittany's hands. Naomi's palms were warm and dry. "You are afraid, And you are also the woman that old lady on the second floor moved a Choi girl for. You hold both of those at the same time. That is what tomorrow costs. Brittany nodded. She squeezed Naomi's hands once and let go. At 7, Okja rang the sunroom bell again. Brittany came with fresh tea. Okja was alone. The puzzle from yesterday was gone. In its place, on the low table, was a small, unwrapped box. Inside the box, on white tissue, sat a pair of small pearl and gold earrings. For tomorrow, Okja said, without looking up. Do not thank me. I did not choose them for you. I chose them for the neck of my grandson's dress. Take them. And put them in the guest suite tonight with the gown. Brittany lifted the box with both hands. Ma'am. Girl. Look at me. Brittany looked. Choi Da-eun spoke to you today. Yes, ma'am. What did she say? She told me to pour her wine before his coffee, ma'am. Okja's laugh was a dry, small sound, more like a page turning than a laugh. Then you will pour his coffee first. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am. Go. Brittany went. She put the earrings in the guest suite herself, on top of the tissue that covered the folded dress, and stood for one long moment in the doorway of that suite, looking at the bed she was going to change on the next evening, and at the vanity mirror that was going to hold her face at 8:59 on Friday night, and at the small brass hook by the door where Naomi was going to hang the apron for the last time. She closed the door quietly. She went back down the service stair. That night she did not go to Junso's room. He did not send Naomi. She lay on the narrow bed in the maid's quarters and listened to the house breathe. Somewhere on the third floor, a door opened and closed. Somewhere in the east wing, a clock struck 1. She did not sleep for a long time, but when she finally did, she slept without dreaming, and the last thing she thought before she went under was that she had held a silver tray steady, while a Korean woman older than her grandmother had moved a Choi girl to the far end of a table on her behalf. She had done nothing to earn that. She had only stopped lowering her eyes. The moving of the chair was the sound of the story turning. She had not heard it yet, but the mansion had, and by morning every hand inside its walls, from the driver to the archbishop's secretary calling about the seating, would already be arranged around a woman none of them had met. Brittany turned once on the pillow and slept the last hour before dawn, and the red dress waited in the tissue, and the empty chair waited at the head table, and somewhere behind the wall, in the old woman's suite, a jade ring tapped twice, slowly, against the arm of a lacquered chair. Brittany closed the door of the staff quarters with her shoulder because both hands were full, red silk on one arm, shoes in the other. She set them down on the narrow bed the way a soldier sets down a rifle before cleaning it. The lamp on the nightstand flickered once and steadied. Naomi was already there, sitting on the wooden chair by the window, one leg folded under her. She had brought her own hairbrush from her locker. Sit. Brittany sat. Naomi worked in silence for the first minute. The brush moved through the long dark waves from crown to shoulder, patient, even, the way her aunt used to do it on Sunday nights back in Baltimore. Brittany closed her eyes. She had not eaten since noon. Her stomach was a small clenched fist under the black uniform she still wore over the silk slip. Breathe. I am. You're holding it. Brittany let the air out. It came in a shudder. The gala was starting one floor below them. She could hear it. The house had a way of carrying sound through the old bones of the walls, a laugh from the west wing, the clink of a glass, the muffled first notes of the string quartet warming up under the chandelier. Every sound landed on her ribs like a coin dropped into a jar. 20 minutes, Naomi said, and set the brush aside. Brittany opened her eyes. In the small mirror on the wardrobe door, she saw a woman she barely recognized. Waves brushed to a shine, cheeks softened by the blush Naomi had insisted on, mouth tinted the color of dark wine. The black uniform still on her body under everything made her look like two women in one about to be dismissed, the other about to be presented. She reached for the red gown draped on the bed. Her hand stopped an inch above the fabric. Naomi. Yeah. What if they humiliate me? The words came out quiet. Not a shake, just quiet. The way you name a thing so you can look at it without flinching. Naomi moved from the chair to the bed. She sat beside Brittany. She took Brittany's hand and held it flat between her own palms, warm, steady. Then they humiliate you. Brittany turned her head. That's your comfort? That's the truth. And truth beats a lie tonight, girl. Listen, if they laugh, you will still walk down those stairs. You will still sit next to him. You will still eat the food you served last week. And you will still leave that room on your own 2 feet. Naomi squeezed. The only humiliation that eats you alive is the one where you agreed you deserved it. You did not agree to that. Do not agree to it tonight. Brittany's eyes shone. She did not cry. She had done her crying 2 nights ago on the edge of a bed, with an apron still tied at her waist. There was nothing left in the ducts for tonight. She nodded once. She stood. The uniform came off in 3 motions. The small buttons at the collar, the apron sash, the zipper at the side. Naomi caught the black dress before it hit the floor and folded it the way Brittany had taught her. Once, months ago. Habit. The white apron went on top, its ties smoothed flat. Then the silk went on. Red poured over her shoulders like water finding its level. The neckline sat exactly where Junso's tailor had said it would. The waist held her the way it had held her mother's wedding dress in the one photograph Brittany still owned. She looked at herself in the mirror and, for a second, forgot the house downstairs. Naomi stepped behind her, fastened the small hook at the nape, and set both hands on Brittany's shoulders. You listening, K-fam? That woman in the mirror is not new. She has been in you the whole time. Tonight, the dress just made room. Brittany laughed. Short, wet. You've been rehearsing that line. All week. They both smiled. Naomi bent to slide the shoes onto Brittany's feet. She fastened the small strap at each ankle with the seriousness of a woman lacing a boxer's gloves. Earrings. He said no ostentatious jewelry. He said no ostentatious. He didn't say naked ears. She reached into her apron pocket and produced 2 small gold studs, her own. She had worn them the day she got her first paycheck at 17. She pressed them into Brittany's palm. Borrowed. I want them back Monday. Brittany fitted the studs one at a time. Her hands were steady now. That was the surprise. Not calm, just steady. A soft knock at the door. Brittany's spine went straight. Miss Brooks. Old Park's voice. Careful, low, the way he always spoke when he was standing in a hallway that did not belong to him. Naomi opened the door 2 inches. The old gardener stood with his cap in both hands. He had traded his gray work uniform for the modest dark suit he wore to funerals and weddings. He looked past Naomi, into the room, at Brittany in red. His weathered face did something complicated, not surprise, recognition. The car is at the west portico for you. Madame Oakjaw asked me to walk you down myself. Brittany's throat closed. Madame Oakjaw. Yes. She asked for you. Yes. Naomi turned to look at Brittany. Brittany looked back. Something quiet passed between them that would take an hour to say in words. Give me 1 minute. Old Park nodded and stepped back into the hall. The door clicked shut. Brittany sat on the edge of the bed, just for a breath. Naomi crouched in front of her. You didn't know she'd send Park? No. Then she's on your side. Or she wants a clean shot. Naomi considered that. Then she shook her head. Not her. That woman weighs every stone before she throws it. If she wanted to hurt you, she would not send her most loyal man to lead you in. She would send Byung-chul. Brittany filed the name away. Lee Byung-chul. Aviators. Earpiece. She had poured him coffee twice this week, and he had not looked up from his phone either time. She stood. She crossed the room. She opened the door. Old Park did not smile. He simply offered his arm, elbow crooked, the way a man of his generation had been taught to offer it when he was young, and the world still ran on those small formalities. She took it. Naomi's voice behind her, soft. Mark my words. You go down those stairs like the house is yours. Brittany did not look back. She was already moving. The hallway was long. Old Park walked slow, on purpose, giving her time to breathe on the way. He did not speak until they reached the top of the west staircase. Then he stopped 1 step above the landing, turned to her, and lowered his voice to the register of a man who had spent 40 years learning how to be heard without being loud. My wife was a maid in this house. Brittany turned her face to him. For 22 years, before she met me, she served Madame Okejah's mother-in-law. She kept her uniform, the whole time. Even at the end, when she was very sick, she still folded that apron. I asked her once why. She said, so I don't forget who taught me to stand straight. His eyes were wet. He blinked once, hard, and it was gone. Whatever happens in that room tonight, Miss Brooks, stand straight. He offered his arm again. She took it again. They descended. Downstairs, the ballroom had filled without anyone quite noticing. Guests arrived in waves, cousins from Seoul in dark silk, 3 of Madame Hyeja's oldest friends in matching pale hanboks, a table of business associates in identical charcoal suits, 2 priests, a judge, the family lawyer with his second wife. Champagne moved on silver trays carried by staff Brittany had trained. She would recognize the way Ji-hoon held the tray by its rim, without ever looking. She would recognize Marisol from the second-floor rotation. She would recognize her own handwriting on the placement cards folded at every setting. At the head table, Madame Hyeja sat in her deep burgundy hanbok with the gold embroidery, spine straight, hands folded, watching the room. Beside her, in the imperial jade-green ceremonial hanbok, Grandmother Okja tapped 1 nail against the arm of her chair in a slow triple beat. 2 nail taps. A pause. 2 more. Anyone who had lived in this house longer than a month knew that rhythm meant she was thinking. Junso was not at the table yet. He was in the private study across the hall, alone, tying his tie in front of a mirror he had rehearsed 100 times. The knot came out clean on the first pull. He set the pin. He looked at the man in the mirror, and the man in the mirror looked back with cold, intelligent eyes and a small black dragon climbing out from under the collar. He heard the click of heels on the marble. He did not turn. The heels were not Brittany's. He knew Brittany's step the way a hunter knows the tread of the animal he has tracked for a season. The door opened without a knock. Choi Da-eun walked in. Sleeveless black satin, a slit up to mid-thigh, diamonds at her ears and around her wrist. Her hair a straight black curtain parted precisely down the middle. Her mouth was already tilted into the shape of the smile she used on men who owed her father money. Junso Ya. He fixed a cufflink. He did not turn. You should be with your mother. I was. She sent me to find you. Davin crossed the room. She stopped 1 arm's length behind him and studied the reflection of them both in the mirror. She said you have been strange this week. She is worried. She is not worried. She is curious. 2 different things. Perhaps. She moved a step closer. There is a rumor downstairs. He fixed the second cufflink. There are always rumors downstairs. They say you brought someone. Silence. Long. The kind of silence Junso used the way other men used a raised voice. They say she is not one of us. He turned then, finally, and looked at her the way he looked at a spreadsheet he had already decided against. Dawon. Yes. Go sit down. She held his gaze for 3 heartbeats. He watched her decide. He watched her file the moment away for the small speech she would be making later, at whatever moment she chose to attack. Then she smiled, the way a knife smiles, and walked out with the red clutch tucked under her arm. He waited until the door closed. He allowed himself 1 long breath. Then he crossed the hall to the ballroom. Brittany reached the top of the grand staircase, and old Park slid his arm free with the smallest bow of his head. He stepped aside. His work for the moment was done. He melted back against the tapestry with the same discretion that had made him invisible in this house for 41 years. Brittany stood alone at the top of the marble. The staircase was wide enough for 6 people abreast. Below, the ballroom lay open. Chandelier, orchestra, tables set with white linen, 300 guests in silk and jewels and diplomatic small talk. From up here she could see everything. The head table where Madame Okja sat tapping her nail. The east wall where Choi Da-eun had just resumed her seat, adjusting the fall of her gown. The service door in the corner, half open, where Naomi had somehow already appeared, tray of champagne in hand, watching from the back wall the way an older sister watches a first day of school. The orchestra was in the middle of a soft, unremarkable waltz. Brittany took her first step down. The second step. The third. Somewhere around the 5th step, a guest at a table near the base of the staircase glanced up. He was a middle-aged banker from Busan who had, 3 days ago, snapped his fingers at Brittany because his water glass was empty. He had not looked at her face then. He was looking now. His mouth opened a little. He nudged the woman beside him. Her head lifted. Her expression did something that traveled, in the space of 1 heartbeat, from admiration to confusion to something colder. She said a word Brittany did not need to hear to translate. The word rippled. Table by table, the ripple crossed the room. Brittany kept walking. She did not slow. She did not speed up. The red silk moved with her, sliding down each step the way a river slides down a stone. Her hand rested lightly on the marble banister, not gripping, not clinging, just present, and her chin was exactly where Naomi had said it should be. Not high, not lowered, level. By the time she reached the 10th step from the bottom, the orchestra had stopped. Not on cue. One violinist saw her and lost his bow. The cellist looked up to see why the violin had faltered and forgot to draw the next note. The conductor, a small man in a white bow tie who had led weddings and funerals in this house for 11 years, turned to see what his musicians were seeing, and his baton froze in the air. The ballroom went silent. 300 silk collars swiveled. Brittany kept walking. A woman at a middle table set her champagne flute down without looking at it, and the glass clicked twice against the porcelain before it settled. That small sound carried the length of the room. She heard Choi Da-eun's voice, low, in perfect cutting Korean, addressed to the woman beside her but pitched to reach the tables around them. "That is the housemaid." The words landed like a slap on cold air. Heads turned to Da-eun for confirmation. She gave it, a small nod, an amused lift of one shoulder, and turned back to Brittany with the smile of a hunter watching quarry find the clearing. At the head table, Madame Haija's hand rose an inch above the table, then settled again. Her face did not move, only her eyes moved. From Brittany to Junso entering from the east door, to Okja, and back to Brittany. Grandmother Okja tapped her nail. 2 beats. Pause. 2 beats. She was smiling. Brittany reached the last step. Her foot in the small black heel touched the polished floor of the ballroom, and something in her spine locked into place. It was not defiance, it was not pride. It was the thing old Park's wife had died holding on to, the knowledge of who taught her to stand straight. She did not look for Junso. She let him find her. He was already crossing the floor. 300 guests parted for him without meaning to. The tailored black suit, the white shirt, the small dark tie, the dragon rising from his collar. He moved through the room with the ordinary lethality of a man who owned every door in it. He stopped in front of her. He did not smile. He looked at her the way he had looked at her the first time she poured him tea in the study, 22 months ago, when he had said her name and mispronounced it, and she had corrected him, and he had said it correctly the second time. He offered his arm. She took it. The silence in the room shifted. It stopped being shocked and became something more dangerous. It became attention. Every mouth in the ballroom decided at the same time to wait for what came next. Junso turned them both, slowly, to face the head table. His voice, when it came, did not rise. He never raised his voice. He never had to. "My mother, my grandmother." The room strained forward. "This is Brittany Ellis. She is with me." He said it in Korean. He said it in English. He said each one exactly once. Madame Hoija rose from her chair. Her burgundy hanbok caught the light. She crossed the 4 steps from the head table to where they stood and stopped 1 arm's length from Brittany. She was slender, elegant, and her eyes had the fine wrinkles of a woman who had cried in private for a long time and stopped, some years ago, deciding it was not worth the powder. She did not speak. She reached out with one delicate hand and touched, very lightly, the fabric of Brittany's sleeve, not to test it, only to acknowledge it. Then she turned to the ballroom. "Welcome our guest." The words were quiet. In a room this size they should not have carried. They carried. Somewhere in the middle of the ballroom, a slow clap began. It was the family lawyer, a man in his 60s who owed grandmother Okja 3 favors and knew when to pay one. A cousin from Seoul joined in, then a table of business associates. The applause moved in a wave, hesitant at first and then not, and by the time it reached the far corners of the room it was the sound of a house choosing, in public, which side of a knife it stood on. Choi Da-eun did not clap. She stared at Brittany over the rim of her champagne, and her hand around the flute went white at the knuckles. Junso walked Brittany to the head table. He pulled out the chair on his right. It was the chair a wife would sit in. He seated her. He took his own seat. He did not release her hand under the table. Brittany turned her head 1 degree and, across the room, over the top of a centerpiece of white orchids, met Naomi's eyes. Naomi lifted her tray of champagne 1 careful inch, a private toast, and mouthed 3 words Brittany read without needing to hear them. Mark my words. At that moment, from the corridor behind the ballroom, from the far end of the hallway where Old Park had already resumed his post beside a lacquered column, came a sound. It was quiet. It was steady. It was the tap of a jade ring against wood, 3 times, slow. Brittany did not turn to look. She had learned, in the last 3 days, exactly what that sound meant. The old woman was writing something down. Grandmother Oakjaw lifted her cup, took 1 measured sip of plum tea, set the cup back on the saucer, and, without looking at anyone in particular, spoke a single sentence in Korean that 6 people at nearby tables heard, and instantly stopped pretending to breathe. Her voice was small, amused, absolute. Now the story becomes interesting. Under the table, Junso's thumb moved once across the back of Brittany's hand. She did not squeeze back. Not yet. She was watching Choi Da-eun set her flute down on the linen and slide 1 hand into the red satin clutch beside her plate. The clutch opened with a small metallic click. Da-eun withdrew a folded square of paper the size of a business card. She set it beside her water glass, unfolded once, and pressed it flat with 2 fingernails. She did not look at Brittany while she did this. She looked at Madame Hai-ja. Auntie. The whole head table lifted its attention. I am so sorry to interrupt this beautiful moment. May I ask a small question? Her Korean was silk. Her smile was porcelain. The staff registry, of course, is public information within the household. I was helping cousin Jiwon last week with the guest list, and I noticed a lovely detail I did not understand. Perhaps our new guest could explain it to us. It would settle a curiosity for the whole table. Madame Hyaja's jaw moved. Once. Da-hoon. It is only curiosity, Auntie. There is no curiosity worth interrupting a welcome for. Then I will wait until after. She did not put the paper away. Junso's thumb, under the table, had gone very still against Brittany's knuckles. Brittany read the stillness. She had learned to read every temperature of that hand over the last months. This one meant he had already calculated 3 responses and was waiting to see which one the room required. She squeezed his hand. Once. Small. It was the first time she had ever initiated a signal between them in public. He understood it. He did not turn his head. He simply relaxed his thumb 1 degree and let her hand rest inside his, the way a bird sits inside a nest that has finally been finished. Across the table, Grandmother Oakjaw tapped her nail twice against the arm of her chair. 2 beats. Pause. 2 beats. She was still smiling. She lifted her cup a second time. She sipped. She set it down. The orchestra remembered itself and resumed the waltz. Softly, under the conversation. Guests returned, gradually, to the performance of eating and pretending not to have been staring. Brittany turned her head 1 degree toward Junso. Your cousin? Second cousin. She has something in her hand. I saw. Do you know what it is? I have 3 guesses. Which is the worst? The one where she knows about my mother's driver. Brittany did not ask what that meant. Not tonight. She filed it in the same drawer as Lee Byung-chul. She would open the drawer later, in the staff quarters, with Naomi holding the flashlight. A server placed the first course in front of her. It was a small porcelain bowl of clear soup with a single scallop at the center. She recognized the bowl. She had washed and stacked its twin, 3 shelves up in the second pantry, the day before yesterday. The absurdity of the recognition almost made her laugh. She did not laugh. She picked up the correct spoon, the one closest to the outer rim, and lifted a small measure of broth to her mouth. The broth was too hot. She did not react. She set the spoon down. She waited for the temperature to be kind. She had spent 2 years watching this family eat. She knew the pace of their table the way a musician knows a metronome. Across from her, an elderly cousin from Seoul cleared his throat and asked Junso about the price of steel. Junso answered in 1 sentence. The elderly cousin nodded gravely, satisfied to have been answered at all. Brittany felt Junso's leg, under the linen, rest lightly against hers. Warmth. Anchor. A private message no one could see. She rested hers back. At the far end of the ballroom, near the corridor, Old Park moved from his post beside the lacquered column to a second post beside the service door. He did it without hurry. He did it because Grandmother Okajah had shifted her gaze 1 degree in that direction, and he had spent 41 years learning to read Grandmother Okajah's gaze. Naomi appeared at his elbow with an empty tray. She whispered something. He whispered back. She melted through the service door and was gone. Brittany watched all of this over the rim of her water glass and understood, with a small, clean shock, that she was not alone at this table. She was not alone in this house. She had been alone in the staff quarters. She had been alone in the mirror. She had been alone climbing into the red silk with her hands shaking against the small hook at the nape. She was not alone now. Old Park was posted. Naomi was moving. Grandmother Okajah was tapping. Madame Hajah had risen from her chair, and the man beside her had put his hand over hers under the linen and had not let go. The knowledge did not make her brave. It made her calm, which was better. Choi Da-eun lifted her folded square of paper again. She tapped it against the water glass, twice, a small sound that was not accidental. She was calling the room's attention back. Auntie, grandmother, everyone, forgive me. I know it is bad manners to speak of household matters at table. Madame Hajah set her spoon down, slowly, carefully. The way a woman sets down a knife when she wants everyone at the table to notice the knife is no longer in her hand. Da-eun, sit. I only wish to congratulate our guest properly. It seems she has been in our home a long time, 2 years, I believe, working here, and now she is at our table in red. It is a beautiful story. I only wanted to ask. Sit. Grandmother Okajah spoke this time, not loud, not raised, small. Small the way a stone is small when it is dropped in a well. Choi Da-eun sat. The paper stayed on the linen. Brittany reached for her spoon again. The broth was ready now. She lifted a measured taste. Salt. Bone. A whisper of ginger. It was excellent soup. Someone in the kitchen had earned their evening. She took a second spoonful. Under the table, Jun-so turned his hand once and interlaced his fingers with hers. Slowly, deliberately. The signet ring on his right pressed cool against the side of her middle finger. He leaned an inch closer without looking at her and spoke into the small space between his shoulder and hers. Hold my hand at dinner. She almost smiled. She kept her face still. She lifted the spoon. I already am. His thumb moved once, across her knuckles, and stopped. At the far end of the corridor, the jade ring tapped wood a third time, 3 slow beats, and did not tap again. The jade ring tapped one more time from a room away, softer, almost a knock on wood the wood itself had not asked for. Brittany felt Jun-so's fingers loosen a fraction around hers, not to let go, only to breathe. The head table had gone quiet in the particular way tables go quiet, when they no longer know which cue to follow. Somewhere near the arches a violin picked its way back into the room, uncertain, and then found its footing. Choi Da-eun's mouth was still open around a word that had not landed. Her clutch sat on the tablecloth in front of her, like a small red animal she had forgotten to feed. She closed her mouth. She opened it again. She reached for her wine. Hold my hand at dinner, he had whispered, and she had. The whisper was already dissolving into the air. What remained was the fact of it, laced through her fingers, ring against ring. Madame Hajah set her chopsticks down. She placed them exactly parallel to the edge of her plate. She looked at her son, and then she looked at Brittany, and the look moved from one to the other with the slow certainty of a woman who had been reading rooms since before either of them were born. Jun-so, she said. Mother. You held her hand. Yes. In front of everyone. Yes. The word landed twice, from 2 different corners of the table, and the second landing was heavier than the first. Grandmother Okajah lifted her cup with both hands. The jade ring caught a chandelier and threw a green splinter across the linen. Brittany kept her spine. She had rehearsed the spine for 4 days in the mirror of the staff room, back straight against the door, chin the width of 1 finger higher than she wanted. She kept her hand in his. She let her thumb rest along the side of his signet ring, the way a hand rests on a banister when it is not sure of the stairs. Choi Da-eun set her wine down without drinking it. Miss Ellis, she said. She tried the smile from earlier and could only find half of it. You must forgive my confusion. I only meant to ask if the staff had been briefed. About the seating. About the guest list. You did not ask that, Brittany said. I beg your pardon? You did not ask that. You asked whether I understood what an evening of this level required. That is a different question. Choi Da-eun's cheeks went the color of the inside of a shell. I did not mean… You meant exactly what you said. Brittany's voice had the steady middle tone of a woman who has been polite to strangers for a long time. I am not going to pretend I did not hear you. I am going to answer you, in the language you chose, and then we can go back to dinner. The violin found a note and held it. An evening of this level, Brittany said, requires two things. It requires that the food arrive hot and that the people at the table treat each other like they belong at it. I have carried the food into this house for 11 months. I know the first part. You will forgive me if I say that tonight I am learning the second part in public. She did not raise her voice. She let the last sentence sit on the linen where the ring had thrown its green light. At the far end of the table, a man in a black jacket coughed into his napkin because he was trying not to laugh. His wife did not look at him. Her hand under the table found his knee and squeezed it once, hard, in a language older than language. Choi Da-eun stood halfway out of her chair, then stopped, then sat back down in a movement she would remember later as the moment she lost the room. Madame Haeja was still looking at her son. She had not looked away since the word yes. A crease had formed between her brows, and she smoothed it now with the side of her middle finger, a small private gesture Brittany had watched her make over teacups for months. The crease came back. "Junso," she said again, softer. "Mother." "How long?" He did not answer right away. He turned his palm inside Brittany's palm so that their fingers laced deeper, the way people lace fingers when a boat is rocking. "A month," he said. "The tea in the study, the nights we could not sleep, the corridor." "The corridor," Madame Haeja repeated. She was tasting the word. "The one with the fig tree." He almost smiled. It was the closest thing to a smile his face had shown at the head of a table in a year. "The one under grandmother's window." Grandmother Okja set her cup down. She set it down carefully, in the exact center of the small circle of moisture it had already made on the linen. She placed both hands flat on the table on either side of the cup. She lifted her chin, only a fraction, only enough to change the shape of the light on her face, and then she laughed. The laugh came out of her, like something that had been waiting behind a door. It was not loud, at first. It was a short bark, then a second bark on top of the first, and then it opened into a full round laughter that shook the small silver bells at her ears. She laughed with her whole thin body. She laughed the way old women laugh when the joke has finally reached the last person in the room and that last person is the one who thought she was telling it. "Oh," she said into the linen. "Oh, my grandson." The table did not know what to do with her laughter. The violin stopped. A waiter froze halfway between two chairs with a bottle held at exactly the wrong angle. Somewhere a fork touched a plate, and no one apologized. "Grandmother," Junso said. "Careful. Are you…" "A month," he says. She lifted her napkin and pressed it under her eyes, and put it back down. "A month. My grandson thinks a month is a long time to keep a secret from an old woman." Madame Haeja turned toward her mother-in-law slowly. "You knew." "Of course I knew." "Since when?" "Since the second week." Okja shook the bells at her ears with a small, proud tilt of her head. "Since the tea." "What tea?" "The 2 in the morning tea. The one he hates. The one he only drinks when a person he cannot say the name of has poured it into a cup with 2 sugars and a spoon of honey that is not on the tray by daylight." She turned her dark, watchful eyes to Brittany, and the amused glint in them was so sharp Brittany almost stepped back from the chair she was not sitting in. "You use my honey, child. The pot in the top left of the pantry. I noticed the level going down. I do not eat honey." So either a ghost had learned to swallow, or somebody at 2 in the morning was pouring it for somebody else. Brittany felt heat climb her throat and stop at her jaw. "I did not know it was your honey," she said. "It was my honey. It has been my honey for 40 years. Okja pointed a small crooked finger at her grandson. "He hates honey. He hates tea. He drank it anyway." That was the first sign. The second sign was the note. "The note?" Madame Haeja said. "Under the tray, on the Tuesday. He forgot he had put it there. Naomi found it when she was scrubbing the tray for the second time because Brittany had scrubbed it once and been distracted. And Naomi does not throw anything away without looking at it first, because Naomi was raised right. She brought it to me." "You made her betray me," Brittany said. Not angry, almost curious. "I did not make her betray anything. The old woman's voice softened at the edges. I told her to keep bringing me the little things she found. I told her nothing bad would come to either of you, as long as I was the one reading the little things. She trusted me because I have known her since she was interviewed at that door. She is a good friend to you, child. Do not be angry with her. Brittany found Naomi with her eyes, past the third column at the back wall. Naomi was standing there in her black and white uniform with her hands folded in front of her. Naomi mouthed one word across the ballroom. Sorry. Brittany shook her head very slowly, once, side to side. Then she smiled at her, with the smile she had not been able to give her for 4 days. Naomi's shoulders dropped a full inch. The third sign, Grandmother Okajah was saying, was the dress. The dress, Madame Hayajah said. I bought it. Okajah lifted her wine cup toward Brittany without spilling a drop. 2 weeks ago, through Naomi. She measured her, quietly. When Brittany asked her to shorten an apron, she wrote the numbers on a slip of paper and slid it under my door. I sent a driver to a woman I have used for gowns since your father was in short trousers, Hayajah, and I ordered the red one, silk, long sleeve at the wrist, open at the shoulder, modest at the front because this child has more grace than my grandson deserves. I had it delivered to Junso's room 3 nights ago because I wanted him to think he chose it. He thinks he chose it. Junso, at the head of the table, in his impeccable black 3-piece suit, in front of 40 of the most careful faces in the country, blushed. It started at the collar, above the silk tie, and rose up the side of his neck where the small black dragon coiled, and the tips of his ears went red before his cheeks did. He looked at his grandmother. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He looked at Brittany. He shook his head once. He laughed. It was a short, surprised laugh, dragged out of him against his will. The table exhaled. It exhaled altogether, 40 people in one long breath they had not realized they were holding, and the exhale turned into a low ripple of laughter that traveled from the head down along both sides and back again. Someone put a hand on someone else's shoulder. A woman near the window pressed a napkin against her eyes and shook her head at herself. The man in the black jacket who had almost laughed earlier finally let himself laugh, and his wife took her hand off his knee because she could stop guarding him. Madame Hayajah had not laughed yet. She was watching her son. Her chopsticks were still parallel to the edge of her plate. Slowly, she lifted her right hand and pressed the back of it against her own mouth. Above the hand, her eyes were wet. She kept her hand there for a long moment. When she lowered it, her mouth was steady again, but the wetness had spilled a thin line down the side of her nose that she did not wipe away. She stood. The table went quiet again, because when Madame Hayajah stood at a gala, tables went quiet. She walked around the corner of the head table. She walked past her son. She stopped in front of Brittany. She was 2 inches shorter than Brittany in her low silk shoes. She took Brittany's face in both her hands. Her palms were cool. She looked at her for a long moment, the way a woman looks at a room she thought had been locked, and finds the door open. You gave me back my son, she said. She said it low, meant for Brittany, but the ballroom was so quiet the sentence went to every corner of it anyway. She leaned in. She kissed the center of Brittany's forehead. She held her lips there half a second longer than a kiss. Thank you, she whispered. Then, in a full, clear voice she pitched for the whole ballroom, she said, My son's girlfriend will sit on my right for the rest of dinner. Someone moved the plate. 2 waiters moved so fast, one of them nearly kicked over a wine cooler. The plate moved, the chair moved. Choi Da-in, at the seat that had been Choi Da-in's, watched her own place setting slide 6 inches to the left and did not say anything, because there was nothing left to say that would not hurt her more than the moving of the plate. Madame Hayajah took Brittany by the hand not held by her son, and walked her the 4 steps around to the chair on her right. She sat her down. She sat down beside her. She poured Brittany's wine herself, from her own decanter, without waiting for a waiter, and pushed the small cup toward her across the linen. Grandmother Okajah rapped her knuckles twice against the table. Not the jade ring this time, the bare knuckle. The sound was small and dry. Now, she said, one more thing. The room settled. This girl, Okajah said, does not lose her job. A ripple went through the table. I am saying this to whoever in this house thought, in the last 15 minutes, that it might be tidier if she were quietly moved to another wing, or another city, or another country. I am saying it to the friends of Miss Choi who are going to call one another in the car on the way home. I am saying it especially to my own son-in-law who is not at this table, because he never comes to my birthday galas anyway, and who will hear this from 3 people before breakfast. She lifted her cup. Nobody, she said, fires the only person in this house who has ever made my grandson ask for advice about love. Nobody. Not this year, not next year, not while I still have this ring on this finger. She drank. The table drank with her, in a slow, uneven wave, some people looking at their neighbors first to make sure they were allowed to. Choi Da-eun stood up. She stood up quietly. She lifted her red clutch. She smoothed her black satin gown down the front. She did not look at Junso. She did not look at Brittany. She looked at Madame Haija, and she gave a small, correct bow of the head, the exact angle a guest gives a hostess when leaving early. Thank you for a beautiful evening, she said. Drive safely, Madame Haija said. Choi Da-eun turned and walked the length of the ballroom on her stilettos with the poise of a woman who had been practicing that walk in her head since she was 12. 2 of her friends at the middle table slid their chairs back to follow her. One did not. The one who did not was watching Brittany with a different look now, the look of a woman filing something away for a later dinner. The doors closed. The room breathed again. Grandmother Okja clapped her hands once, sharp. Music, she said. We are not a funeral. Music. The string quartet by the Arches took the cue with such relief that the first bar came in a half beat early. A waltz, slow, old. Not the kind of song galas played anymore. Okene had chosen it herself for her own birthday, and no one had had the courage to talk her out of it. Junso turned in his chair toward Brittany. Their hands were still laced. He looked at her. He tilted his head, 1 degree, toward the polished floor at the center of the room. Dance with me, he said. Here. Here. In front of them. Especially in front of them. Brittany rose. Her legs held. The red silk moved around her ankles, the way water moves when a stone has stopped falling through it. Junso stood. He offered her his arm the correct way, elbow up, palm turned in. She placed her hand on his forearm. They walked to the center of the ballroom. Madame Haija watched them go. She reached over and took her mother-in-law's hand across the linen and squeezed it once. Okja squeezed back and did not let go. At the center of the floor, Junso turned to face her. He put his right hand at the small of her back where the silk gathered. He lifted her right hand into his left at the correct height, the ballroom height, the height she had seen in old photographs on the wall of the east corridor. Her fingers with his ring against them rested on his shoulder in full view of the family. He looked down at her. You spoke well, he said. I was afraid. I know. You could not tell. I could tell. They began to move. He led the first step. She followed the second. The third they did together. He was not a good dancer. He was a boss with straight shoulders and no time, and he moved like a man who had been taught the box shape once at 17 and never asked again. She adjusted, 1 beat under his, and he felt her adjust and let her, and the box became a circle. Your grandmother, she said, is a menace. Yes. She is going to run our lives. Yes. Are you sorry? No. They turned. The room turned around them. Somewhere at the head table, a woman lifted her phone to take a photograph, and Madame Haija reached across without looking and placed her palm gently over the lens. The phone went down. The woman apologized. No photograph was taken. There would not be one, of this dance, in any newspaper the next morning. It belonged to the ballroom, and the ballroom would keep it. Brittany felt his thumb move once along the small of her back, the same way it had moved along her knuckles at the head table, the same way it had moved on the edge of his bed 4 days ago. This time she felt the tremor in it. It was not hers, this time. Junso. Yes. You are shaking. He did not answer for a full turn. I have not danced since I was a boy, he said. I did not know I remembered how. She lifted her face to look at him. He was looking down at her the way he had looked at her under the fig tree in the corridor, the way he had looked at her over the small silver tray in his study at 2 in the morning, with the honey and the tea. The mask was not on. The mask, she understood suddenly, had not been on for a long time. She had only just been given the eyes to see it. At the head table, Grandmother Okja lifted her cup one more time. She did not propose a toast. She only lifted it, in the direction of the 2 people at the center of the floor, and drank alone. At the back wall, against the third column, Naomi Brooks stood with her hands folded and watched her friend dance in the red gown she had helped measure, and she smiled a small crooked smile that had a dimple in it, and she did not need to be thanked because she already knew. The waltz ended. They did not stop moving. The quartet, without a signal, slid into the next piece. The head table did not sit back down. Madame Hijia was leaning her head against her mother-in-law's shoulder. Okja was patting her hair. Brittany rested her forehead lightly against Junso's collar, where the white shirt met the silk tie, where the small black dragon curled up the right side of his neck. She felt the pulse in his throat under her forehead, steady, fast, alive. "Say it," he whispered. "Say what?" "That you will stay." She lifted her forehead off him. She looked at him. The music kept going. "I will stay," she said. "Say the rest." "There is no rest." "There is." She smiled. It was the same smile she had given Naomi across the ballroom, the one she had not been able to give for 4 days. "I will stay," she said, "as long as you keep asking." He closed his eyes. He let out a breath that had been in his chest since a corridor at 2 in the morning a month ago. He opened his eyes. They kept dancing. At the head table, Madame Hijia lifted her head off her mother-in-law's shoulder and wiped her eyes with the back of her wrist and picked up her chopsticks again. She began to eat. She had not eaten since the 3rd course. Somewhere at the middle tables, people had started eating again too, quietly, the way people eat after a storm has passed and the roof is still on the house. Grandmother Okja set her cup down. She placed her thin-veined hand flat on the linen with the jade ring facing up. She looked around her ballroom, at her family, at her grandson holding a housemaid in red silk at the center of a slow circle, at her daughter-in-law eating rice again, at the empty chair where Choi Da-eun had been, at Naomi against the back wall smiling with a dimple, at the string quartet whose leader was watching her for the next cue. She nodded, once, to herself. "Good," she said, very quietly, to no one but the ring. Halfway through the second piece, Madame Hijia rose from her chair. She walked to the edge of the dance floor and stood there in her burgundy silk with her hands folded low at her waist and simply watched. After a moment, Grandmother Okja joined her, leaning her thin weight on the wooden cane she had not touched all evening. The two women stood side by side and watched the couple turn. "He looks like his father," Okja said. "He looks like himself." Hijia did not turn her head, for the first time in a long time. "Yes. You should have told me. I was going to tell you tonight." Okja tapped the cane once against the polished floor. "I was going to tell you at exactly this moment. She saved me the trouble." Hijia laughed. It was small and dry, and it was the first laugh anyone in the house had heard out of her in months. She reached over and took her mother-in-law's arm and did not let go. At the back wall, Naomi stepped forward from the 3rd column, only 2 steps, so that Brittany could see her clearly if she turned. Brittany turned. Their eyes met across the floor. Naomi lifted her hand at her hip in a small private wave. Brittany, without breaking the step, without lifting her hand from Junso's shoulder, tilted her head toward her friend a half-inch in answer. It was enough. The old butler Chang Su, in his ill-fitting dark suit, was standing near the service door, with a tray he had forgotten he was holding. His eyes were wet. He set the tray down on a side table. He straightened his tie. He allowed himself, in the shadow of the door, a small proud smile before he went back to work. At the center of the room, Junso turned Brittany under his arm, the way he had seen his father turn his mother in the same ballroom when he was 7 years old. Brittany's red silk fanned out and came back. Her hand with his signet ring on it landed again on his shoulder. She rested it there. She left it there. She was not going to move it. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not for anyone in this house or outside it. Somewhere above them, in the coffered ceiling, a chandelier crystal caught the light and threw a small green splinter onto the polished floor, the exact color of a certain ring, and neither of them noticed it, because they were not looking down anymore. They were looking at each other, and the family, at last, was watching them together. Brittany stood barefoot on the cold tile of the staff quarters, the red gown pooled at her waist, the top half held against her chest with both hands like a shield she had not yet earned. Naomi knelt behind her, working the small hidden zipper along her spine, slow, 1 tooth at a time. Neither of them spoke. The gown moved up her ribs. It stopped under her arms. Naomi laid her palm flat between Brittany's shoulder blades and left it there for a moment. Warm, steady, before she pulled the zipper the last inch. "Turn," Naomi said. Brittany turned. The small mirror on the wall was cracked at the corner. It had been cracked for years. She had walked past it every morning of her employment and never once really looked into it. Now the woman in the glass was wearing red silk that caught the yellow bulb overhead and threw the light back at the ceiling in soft moving pools. The bodice held her waist the way Okja had said it would. The skirt fell heavy and clean past her ankles. Her hair had been pinned up an hour ago by Naomi's careful hands, and then pulled loose again by Brittany's careful hands, and then pinned up a second time. Wine lipstick, small earrings, a thin bracelet that had come inside the envelope with her name on it in Junso's handwriting. She looked at herself. Her mouth trembled. She looked away. "Don't," Naomi said. She had learned to read that mouth. "Don't do that to your face. Not tonight. I look like a lie. You look like a woman. I look like a housemaid in a costume." Naomi stepped in front of her and took her by the shoulders. She held her the way you hold someone who is about to run. "Brittany, look at me." Brittany looked at her. "You have poured tea for that family for 2 years. You have carried their laundry. You have wiped their glasses. You have watched them pretend you are not in the room. Tonight, you are going to walk into that room in front. Not behind, not with a tray, in front. That's what scares me." "I know." The silence between them held a long time. Brittany sat down on the edge of the narrow bed, the red skirt spilling over the gray blanket, and she pressed the heels of both hands against her eyes so that the makeup would not run. Her breath came in through her teeth. Naomi crouched in front of her and laid one hand on her knee, just the weight of it, no words. "What if they humiliate me?" Brittany said. It came out quiet. It came out without the shape of a question. Naomi did not answer right away. "What if they wait until every camera is on my face and one of them says something and everyone laughs and I stand there in this dress, in this stupid, beautiful dress, and I have nowhere to put my hands? What if he lets it happen? What if he freezes? Naomi, what if he freezes? He won't. He might. He won't. You don't know him. I know his grandmother." Brittany lowered her hands. Her mascara had held. Her eyes had not. "His grandmother?" "Okja bought this dress," Naomi said. "I gave her your measurements 2 weeks ago. She asked me the way you ask a friend for a favor, not the way an old woman asks the maid." I sat down. She poured me tea. She asked me if you were the kind of woman who would sit down when she was tired or keep standing to look strong. I told her the truth. Brittany looked at her. "You told her what?" "I told her you would keep standing." "Then why did she buy this?" "Because," Naomi said, and her voice went soft in a way Brittany had not heard before. "She also asked me if you were the kind of woman who could be forced into anything, and I said no." And she smiled, Brittany. She smiled the way my grandmother used to smile when she already knew the answer and just wanted to hear you say it. Brittany let out a long breath. It shook near the end. "She knows. She has known for weeks." "How long is weeks?" "Long enough. Long enough that she is not going to let them humiliate you. She just wants to see how you handle it when they try. That is different. That is worse. That is better. That means you have a chair." Brittany laughed once, sharp, without joy. Then, a second later, with a little joy, she wiped under her eye with her ring finger the way Okja had shown her once, without knowing she was showing her. Naomi stood, stepped behind her, adjusted the pin at the top of her hair, tucked one loose strand back into the shape it was meant to hold. "Stand up," Naomi said. Brittany stood, walked to the door and back. Brittany walked. The red skirt whispered against her shins. Naomi watched her from under her lashes, professional, careful, the way she watched a stain to see if it would come out. Again, slower. Brittany walked again, slower. Chin. Brittany lifted her chin. Not that much. Halfway between the maid's chin and the queen's chin. "There. That is you. Hold it there." Brittany held it there. "Okay," Naomi said. "Oh, now the shoes." The shoes were low, black, satin. Okja's message inside the envelope had said only 2 words next to them, not heels. Brittany slid her feet into them and felt the ground under her again. That was the first thing that stopped her from crying. She had ground under her. The old woman upstairs, whoever she really was, had made sure of that. Somewhere far away, in another wing of the house, a string quartet started to tune. The sound came thin and distant through the walls. Small notes tested one against another, the beginning of an argument that would resolve itself. Downstairs, the ballroom was already halfway full. Lee Byung-chul stood at the top of the staircase in the black two-piece suit he wore when there were more than 50 people in the house. Small earpiece behind the right ear. Aviators tucked into his breast pocket for once, because he was inside. He had put men in the driveway, men in the coat room, men in the pantry, one man on the roof. He did not tell Junso about the man on the roof. He never did. That was his own piece. He watched the front doors open and close, open and close. Then he watched them open again and stay open a little too long. Choi Da-eun walked in. She walked in the way she had rehearsed with her mother for 6 days. Slow, center of the doorway, chin low, eyes lifted. Black satin gown clean to the floor. The high slid up her right thigh, catching just enough light with each step to make people look and then pretend they had not. Diamond earrings, diamond tennis bracelet, red satin clutch tucked under her elbow like a thin, small book she meant to read to someone tonight. She stopped inside the entrance and let the room notice her. Haija saw her first. Okja saw her second, from her chair near the head table, and the sharp, watchful glint in the old woman's eyes went 1 degree sharper. Okja said nothing. She lifted her cup of tea, she sipped, she set the cup down. Da-eun crossed the marble in 5 careful strides and stopped at Haija's elbow. Auntie, Da-eun, you look beautiful tonight. So do you. They embraced the way women who do not like each other embrace at public functions. Cheek near cheek, no pressure. Haija's hand hovered a moment at the small of Da-eun's back, and then dropped without landing. Where is he? Da-eun said. Casual. As if she had not planned the sentence in the car. Upstairs. Alone? Haija's smile stayed exactly where it had been. Nothing in her face moved. Da-eun. Auntie. Sit down. Eat something. Da-eun sat. She did not eat. She placed the red clutch on the table beside her plate and adjusted its angle by 1/2 inch. Then she looked up across the room, past the string quartet, past the tall arrangements of white lilies, at the top of the grand staircase, and she waited. Han Mi-sun crossed the room with the silver tablet in her left hand and stopped at Hyeja's shoulder. Madam, the guest list is complete. Everyone the master invited has arrived. Everyone. Everyone. Hyeja's smile widened 1 careful millimeter. Good. Mi-sun did not move. Was there something else? He has asked that the announcement come after the first course, not before. He has asked? He has instructed. Ah, Hyeja smoothed the front of her burgundy silk hanbok with 1 gentle motion of her hand. Then we will pour the soup. Mi-sun left. Da-eun watched her leave. Da-eun sharpened her smile. Upstairs, Junso stood in front of his bedroom mirror and slid the platinum signet ring on and off his right hand 3 times before he left it on. The tattoo on his neck showed clearly at his open collar. He fastened the collar. It showed less. He looked at himself. He unfastened the collar again. Park Chang-soo knocked once at the open door. Master. Chang-soo. She is ready. How is she? Frightened. Good. Good? She should be frightened. Everyone in this room should be frightened tonight. She is the only one who has the right to be. Chang-soo bowed his head slightly. The old gardener had not put on the dark, ill-fitting suit yet. He was still in the gray uniform, the name patch, the flat cap in his hand. He watched Junso's face in the mirror. Master, speak. You do not have to do it this way. Junso turned from the mirror. He looked at the old man the way he had looked at him every morning for the last 21 years, since he had been 12 and had first watched Chang-soo bury a dying cat in the far garden without being asked. How would you have me do it? Quietly. In your grandmother's sitting room. Family only. That is not doing it. That is asking permission. You are not asking. I am declaring. Then declare in a small room, master. It is the same declaration. Junso was quiet a long time. No, he said. In a small room, it is a favor. In front of every family that ever tried to marry me off, it is a fact. Chang-soo lowered his eyes. He did not argue further. He had known when to stop arguing with this boy since the boy was 13. He had been right about that timing every time. She will need someone to walk her down, Junso said. Naomi will walk her down. To the top of the stairs only. To the top of the stairs only. From there she walks alone. That is what she wants? That is what she said. Junso let out a slow breath through his nose. He looked at himself once more in the mirror. He fastened the collar again. He left the tattoo half hidden. Tell Naomi it is time. Chang-Su bowed. He left. The string quartet downstairs finished its tuning and began. In the corridor between the staff quarters and the grand landing, Naomi walked one step behind Brittany with her hand at the small of her back, not pushing, just there. Brittany's low satin shoes made no sound on the runner. The red skirt moved at her ankles. Her hands hung open at her sides because Naomi had told her, twice, not to clasp them in front of her like a maid. At the corner before the landing, Naomi stopped her. Wait! Brittany waited. Naomi walked past her, went to the top of the stairs alone, looked down into the ballroom, held there a full 6 seconds, then came back. She is at the head table, Naomi said. Black gown, high slit, diamonds. I know who she is. Do not look at her when you come down. I am not going to look at her. Look at him. He is at the head table too. I know. Look at him. Only at him. Not at his mother. Not at his grandmother. Not at Dawoon. Him. And if he does not look back, he will look back. And if he does not. Naomi took Brittany by both shoulders again, the second time that night, and this time she squeezed a little. Then you look at his grandmother and she will fix it. That is the plan. There are 3 people in that room already on your side. You cannot see them, but they can see you. Walk. Brittany walked. She reached the top of the staircase. She stopped there for one held breath. The chandelier above the landing was lit at every socket. The light came down on her from above, warm and full, and it caught the red silk and made it a color the ballroom had not seen before. Below her, 30 round tables, 240 guests, silver, crystal, white lilies, the string quartet in the corner playing something soft in 3/4 time. The nearest guest looked up first, a woman in her 50s, gold earrings, a small plate of appetizer halfway to her mouth. The plate stopped. Then the guest next to her looked up. Then the man across from them, following their gaze. Then the 2 tables behind them. Then the whole quadrant of the room. The chain of turned heads moved across the ballroom in a slow, silent wave the way a wind moves across a wheat field. The string quartet did not stop, but the room around it stopped. At the head table, Hee-ja looked up. Ok-ja looked up second. The old woman had been watching the door all night. She had known to look at the stairs only when the room began to notice them. Choi Da-eun looked up third. The sharpened smile stayed on her face for exactly 1 second longer than it should have, and then it broke, and then she put it back together, and then it broke again. Junso looked up last. He set his glass down. He stood. Brittany began to descend. She kept her chin at the halfway point Naomi had shown her. Neither the queen's chin nor the maid's chin. She kept her hands loose at her sides. She kept her eyes on him, only on him, the way Naomi had told her. She descended 1 step. The room stayed silent. She descended a 2nd step. Somewhere near the back, a woman said something in a low voice to the woman next to her. That woman did not answer. She descended a 3rd step. A man at a table halfway to the head lifted his glasses, cleaned them on his napkin, put them back on, and looked again. At table 9, an older woman leaned to her husband and whispered, in Korean, "Is that not the girl who poured our tea last month?" Her husband said, in Korean, "That is not possible." His wife said, in Korean, "Look at her face." He looked at her face. He set his own glass down. The chain moved through the room a 2nd time, quieter, uglier, more curious. Faces bent to other faces. Napkins were lowered. At the 4th table from the head, a woman in emerald green covered her mouth with her hand and then, remembering herself, lowered the hand and placed it flat on the table. Brittany kept walking down. She was on the 8th step when she heard the first small laugh. It came from somewhere on her left, quick, cut short, immediately embarrassed. She did not turn her head. She kept her eyes on Junso. Junso did not smile at her. He did not need to. His face had gone still in the specific way his face went still when he had decided something and was daring the world to argue. At the head table, Hyeja placed both hands flat on the tablecloth, palm down, and slowly straightened her spine. Okaja did something no one but Chang Su, watching from the far door, saw. She lifted her cup of tea a second time. She held it near her mouth. She did not drink from it. She smiled behind it, a private smile, a whole conversation of a smile. Then she set the cup down. Brittany reached the 12th step. Choi Da-yoon's fingers closed around the stem of her wine glass so hard that Hye-ja, without looking, reached across and rested her own hand on the girl's wrist. Da-kyun. Auntie. Breathe. Auntie, that is, breathe. Da-kyun breathed. Brittany reached the 16th step, the last step before the wide landing where the staircase spilled into the ballroom floor. There she paused for the second time, not for effect, because for one single second her knee betrayed her, and she needed to place her hand on the banister to steady herself. She placed her hand on the banister. She placed it there without hurry, without embarrassment, as if she had planned to do exactly this. She let it rest 3 heartbeats. She removed it. She stepped onto the ballroom floor. Now the murmur began. Now the whole room understood that no one was going to stop this. The whispers grew, layered on each other, changed into a low, continuous sound like water moving under a floor. A voice near the string quartet said clearly, in English, "Is that the housemaid?" The word housemaid crossed the room in every direction and came back to itself twice. Brittany did not flinch. She kept walking toward the head table. Her low satin shoes made no sound at all on the marble. Junso was still standing. He walked out from behind the head table. He walked toward her. He did not hurry. He did not slow. He walked at the exact pace she was walking, and when they were 3 meters apart, the ballroom stopped murmuring for the second time that night. And this time the silence was deeper, because now people understood that they were about to see the answer to their whisper. He stopped in front of her. He offered his left hand. She placed her right hand into his. He turned. He did not release her hand. He walked her the last 10 steps to the head table, with her hand in his. At chest height, plainly visible to every guest in the room, the platinum signet ring on his finger, catching the light directly beside her wine-red nails. At their table, he pulled out the chair beside his own, the chair that had been set for Choi Da-eun by the seating plan Hye-ja had approved 4 days ago, and that Han Mi-sun had quietly changed 3 hours ago on Junso's written order. And Brittany sat. Da-eun's chair was now 1 seat further out. Da-eun did not look at Brittany. Da-eun looked at her own untouched soup. The red satin clutch on the table beside her plate had not moved. Her hand, which had been closed around the stem of her wine glass, released it slowly, finger by finger, and lowered itself into her lap. Hye-ja spoke. Her voice was smooth, pitched to carry only as far as the head table and no further. Junso. Mother. You will introduce her. After the first course. Now. After the first course, mother, it has been arranged. Hye-ja looked at him a long time. She looked at Brittany a shorter time. Her face, which had been trained since girlhood to give away nothing at public functions, gave away nothing. Then she turned her head 1 small degree and spoke, in Korean, to the server standing behind her chair. Serve the soup. The server bowed. The kitchen door opened. The waitstaff came out in a single silent line, 24 of them, silver trays balanced high, the first course beginning to reach the tables. At the far edge of the room, Naomi appeared at the back wall, where the staff usually stood. She did not stand where the staff stood. She stood 1 step forward of them, arms folded, watching the head table. Chang-su, in his dark, ill-fitting suit now, joined her there a moment later. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them needed to. Okja, from her chair, lifted her cup of tea again. This time she drank from it. She looked over the rim directly at Brittany. She let her eyes rest on Brittany's face for the length of a full swallow. Then she winked. Brittany, who had spent the last 40 minutes being told by everyone who loved her not to cry, felt her mouth begin to shape a smile she could not hold back. She lowered her face 1 careful inch, hid the smile in the collarbone of the red gown, and let it pass. Junso, beside her, reached under the tablecloth and found her hand a second time. He did not squeeze it. He simply held it. Steady, warm, present. The soup arrived at their table. The server ladled it into her bowl first. Brittany picked up the spoon that had been laid at her right hand and, in front of 240 guests who had watched her pour tea into cups exactly like these many times, she began to eat. Across the table, Choi Da-in finally lifted her eyes. She looked at Brittany. She looked at Junso. She looked at Haeja. She looked at Okja. And she began, very slowly, to understand that the humiliation planned for tonight was not going to belong to the woman in red. She lifted her own spoon. Her hand was steadier than it had any right to be. She dipped it into her soup. She lifted it to her mouth. She sipped. At the head of the room, the string quartet moved into the second movement of the piece it had been playing, and the ballroom, which had not remembered to make noise for almost a full minute, began, table by table, to remember. A fork touched a plate. A glass touched a glass. A voice made a small, careful comment about the weather. Another voice answered. The dinner had begun. Brittany kept her hand under the tablecloth exactly where he was holding it. Her chin stayed at the halfway point Naomi had shown her. Her spine stayed where the red silk had set it. She did not look at Daonin. She did not look at Haeja. She looked at her soup, and at him, and at the small carved wooden spoon Okja had lifted again across the table. Under the table, Junso's thumb moved once across the back of her hand. He leaned toward her. He did not turn his face. He spoke without moving his lips more than he had to. After this course, he said, I am going to say something. When I say it, do not stand. Do not smile. Just hold my hand where they can see it. Where they can see it, she repeated. Where all of them can see it. She took a slow breath. She let it out. Junso. Yes. They already see it. He did not answer. He turned his face one careful degree toward her, only enough that his eyes could find hers, and the ballroom, which thought it had finished being surprised for the night, watched the feared master of the Kang house look at a woman in a red gown, with an expression it had never seen him wear before, and understand, all at once, that this was the part of the evening it had actually come to see. Junso leaned toward her a fraction more, close enough that only she could hear the words, and said, Hold my hand at dinner. Brittany answered by doing it. Her fingers slid across the white linen and found his. She laced them slowly, one at a time, with the calm of a woman who had already crossed her worst bridge in the staff quarters an hour ago. His signet ring pressed cool against the side of her knuckle. She did not let go. At the far end of the table, Madame Haeja set her chopsticks down with a small, clean sound. The silence that followed was not the shocked silence of the staircase. It was heavier. It was the silence of people who understood, all at once, that they were not being asked to accept a rumor, but to sit through a fact. Choi Da-eun found her voice first. She smiled the way she had rehearsed on the drive over, the small, tilted smile she used at charity boards when she wanted to look wounded and generous at once. Junso, she said, in Korean, softly, so that the American guests would only catch the music of it. You are a man of humor tonight. He answered in English. I am not. 2 words. The table felt them land. Da-eun's smile stayed on her face out of pure discipline, but her jaw shifted a millimeter, and the diamond drop on her right ear moved with it. She looked at Brittany the way a buyer looks at a piece of furniture she is deciding whether to break in front of the seller. How lovely, she said in English now. Warmer, brighter. And so brave of you, my dear, to come out of the kitchen for us. Truly. I always say, the girls who serve us are the ones with the strongest hearts. She lifted her wine, half a toast, half a knife. One only worries about the difference. In worlds, it is such a long way from carrying a tray to sitting at a table. Brittany let the sentence finish. She did not squeeze Junso's hand. She squeezed her own napkin once under the tablecloth, so that no one saw the release of the thing she had been holding since the staircase, and then she set the napkin flat again. She spoke without raising her voice. Miss Choi, she said, I carried a tray to this table twice this week. On Tuesday, I brought Grandmother Okja her tea. On Wednesday, I brought Madame Haeja her coffee. Both times, the person I served said thank you to me by name. Neither of them found the distance so long. A small sound moved through the guests near the middle of the table. It was not laughter. It was the sound people make when they are told a thing they were not expecting to be told out loud. Daoun's smile did not move. "How sweet," she said. "It is not sweet," Brittany answered. "It is a fact. If you are worried about my ability to sit at a table, I would rather hear the specific worry. Then I can answer it." Daoun's fingers touched the stem of her glass. She was, for the first time in the evening, considering her options. She chose the wrong one. "My worry," she said, and now the honey was thinner in her voice, "is only for the family. A house like this has enemies. A woman who has been inside its walls for a year, who has seen its doors open and close, its schedules, its shipments. A woman like that is a gift to anyone who wishes the Kang name harm. I say this with love, Junso. You know I do." She had spoken to him. Brittany answered, "You are saying I might be a spy. I am saying nothing so vulgar. You are saying it, say it clearly, then I will answer clearly." Dasun's mouth opened. She closed it. The people at the table who had known her for 20 years understood that she had just been walked into a corner by a woman in a red gown who had not raised her voice once. Brittany did not wait for her to try again. "I have been inside these walls for 11 months, she said. She looked at Daoun, and then, calmly, at Madame Heja, because Madame Heja was the one who mattered. "In 11 months I have carried keys, receipts, guest lists, laundry from 3 floors, and the tea service for private meetings I was not asked to remember. I remember none of them. If any of what I have seen inside this house had been sold, you would not be sitting here tonight worrying about my dress. You would be sitting somewhere else worrying about your name." Madame Heja's eyes moved. Only her eyes. "That is not humility," Brittany said. "That is the reason I am still here." She turned back to Daoun. "If your worry was real, Miss Choi, you would have brought it privately. You brought it to a table with 30 witnesses. That is not worry, that is a hope, and I am sorry to disappoint the hope." Junso's thumb moved once against the back of her hand under the tablecloth. It was the first movement he had made in 90 seconds. It said, "Keep going." It said, "You are doing what I could not." Daoun laughed. It was a good laugh. Trained. "You have a mouth," she said in Korean. "I have both," Brittany said in Korean. She had learned 3 sentences. She had chosen the right one. The gasp at the middle of the table was small and honest, and came from a cousin who had underestimated everyone in the room. That was when Grandmother Okja began to laugh. It started as a wheeze in the very center of her small chest, the wheeze of an old woman who had been holding something in for weeks and finally found the excuse to let it out. Then it climbed. It became sound. It became her whole face. She put her hand flat on the table, next to the jade rice bowl she had eaten from at that seat for 40 years, and she laughed until the tears at the corners of her eyes caught the chandelier light. Everyone froze. No one had heard her laugh like that since her husband was alive. "Oh," she said, in Korean, to no one and to everyone. Oh, my grandson, my clever grandson, you thought you were surprising us." Junso's face did the thing his face never did. It changed color. The dragon on his neck, exposed above the loosened collar, seemed for a moment like the only steady thing about him. Grandmother Okja lifted a finger, not accusing, delighted. "The tea," she said. 2 a.m. every night, 3 weeks now, in your study. You hate tea at 2 a.m. You have hated tea at 2 a.m. since you were 9 years old. And suddenly, 3 weeks ago, you started calling for it every night. Do you know who has been carrying it up those stairs?" She turned her head toward Brittany. Brittany's cheeks went warm under the blush. "I did not know you knew," Brittany said, quietly. "I know when a cup leaves my kitchen and when it comes back cold," Grandmother Ukja said. "I know when a boy who has not asked for tea in 24 years asks for it every night at the same hour. I know when the same girl carries it up and comes down 40 minutes later with the cup still full." The table did not breathe. 40 minutes, Grandmother Okja repeated, with satisfaction. Every night, for 3 weeks, to drink cold tea. A cousin at the far end broke first. He put his hand over his mouth. It did not help. The laugh escaped anyway. Grandmother Okja was not finished. "The note," she said. Junso closed his eyes. Under the silver tray, in the west parlor, folded twice. Written in your handwriting, in English. Because the girl reads English. She smiled, entirely at Brittany now. I read English too, slowly, but I read it. Brittany's free hand went to her mouth. You read it? I read it. I put it back. I did not tell anyone. I waited to see what my grandson would do next. Her small dark eyes cut back to Junso, delighted and cruel, in the specific way only a grandmother is allowed to be. He did the gown. Junso opened his eyes. He looked at his grandmother the way a man looks at a general who has been watching his campaign the whole time from a hill he did not know existed. The gown, Grandmother Okja said, red, size 6, from the atelier on 5th, delivered in a white box with no card. She lifted her small hand. Theory 1. She showed the table her palm. I bought it. The room made a sound. Junso's mouth opened. I bought it, she said. You wrote the address. You gave the atelier your card. You thought you were being careful. You forgot who calls that atelier every spring for my birthday. She tapped her small fingers together, delighted. I called Miss Ha the next morning. I said my grandson has ordered a red gown. He does not know the woman's size. Give him a size that will not fit and he will bring her here to be measured, and I will have my answer. She laughed at me. She said, your grandson gave a size, 6, precise, from memory. She looked at Junso with something enormous in her face. From memory, she said again. My grandson, who does not remember the day of the week, knew a woman's size from memory. Naomi, at the back wall, put her hand very quickly over her own mouth. Grandmother Okija saw her. Naomi Brooks, she said, sharply, in English, without turning her head. Come here. Naomi walked forward the way a soldier walks when there is nothing left to do but walk. The size, Grandmother Okja said. How did he know it? Naomi looked at Brittany. Brittany did the smallest nod a woman has ever done. I told him, ma'am, Naomi said. How did you know? I do her laundry, ma'am. On Thursdays. She helps me with mine on Sundays. We share a hamper. And he asked you. He asked me if I would tell him. He did not order me. He asked. Grandmother Okija tipped her head to one side. She considered this. She smiled with only half her mouth. He asked, she repeated. To the table. My grandson asked. He did not order a housemaid. He asked her, and she said yes. She looked at Junso. You have been raised well, after all. I was starting to worry. The laugh that broke out of the table then was not one laugh. It was a released thing. It was the sound of a family that had not been allowed, for a very long time, to laugh together. Da Ingchun laughed too. She had no choice. To not laugh would have been to be the only person in the room refusing to breathe. But her fingers went white on the stem of her glass, and no one at that table, from that night forward, would ever again consider her a serious contender for anything inside the Kang name. Madame Hayaja rose. The laughter thinned. She was a small woman standing at the head of a very long table, and every person in that room, gala guest or family, understood that the moment had come and belonged to her. She walked the length of the table slowly. Her burgundy hanbok whispered against itself. She stopped behind Junso's chair, and for one instant, she rested her palm on the crown of her son's head, the way she had rested it there when he was a boy, in the moment before he did something difficult. He did not lean back into it, but he did not pull away. He closed his eyes for one breath. Then she moved to Brittany. Brittany started to rise. Stay seated, my dear. Brittany sat. Madame Hayaja bent. She was very close. Her hand cupped the side of Brittany's face, the way a mother's hand cups the face of a daughter she is about to send into weather. She pressed her lips to Brittany's forehead. It was not a performance. It was not for the guests. It was a small, warm, private kiss, and Brittany closed her eyes under it. Then Madame Hayaja spoke, so quietly that only Brittany heard. You gave me my son back. Brittany's eyes stayed closed. He was gone. For a long time I did not know if he would come back. Whatever you did in that study at 2 in the morning, whatever you said to him over cold tea, thank you. Brittany could not answer. Madame Hayaja straightened. She turned to the room. Her voice found its public register again. Calm, gracious, absolute. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, you came tonight for a gala. I hope you will forgive us for giving you an announcement instead. My son has chosen a woman he intends to keep. Her name is Brittany Ellis. She is a guest of this house from tonight forward. I ask you to treat her as I do." The applause was not loud at first. Then Grandmother Okajah began to clap, slowly, firmly, once, twice. The room caught up. The applause built and did not stop for a full 10 seconds, and Brittany, seated in a red gown with a Korean grandmother clapping for her at one end of the table and a Korean mother of a Mafia son having just kissed her forehead at the other, understood, for the first time in 11 months, that she was not going to be sent back down the servants' stairs tonight. Grandmother Okajah was not done. She rose. She used her cane for the first time all evening, not because she needed it, but because it made the point. "One more announcement," she said, in Korean now. "To the family. Hear me." The family heard her. "No one," she said, "in this house, or in any house that answers to this house, will dismiss Brittany Ellis. Not for a mistake, not for a rumor, not for a preference, not for any reason." She lifted her cane a small inch off the floor. "She is the only person in this family who has made my grandson ask for love advice. I intend to keep her nearby for as long as I am breathing, and after I am not breathing, my grandson will keep her nearby for me. Anyone who touches her touches me first." There was a silence. Then a cousin at the middle of the table said, "Yes, grandmother," in the small automatic voice of a boy who had been answering that woman his whole life. 12 other voices said it after him. Dawoon, at her chair, said nothing. She lifted her glass. She drank. When she set the glass down, she did it with the care of a woman who knew, precisely, that a door had closed behind her. Grandmother Okja sat. She looked at Junso. "Now," she said, in English, so that Brittany would hear it, "take her to dance. You have been sitting long enough. My back hurts just watching you." Junso did not move. He looked at Brittany. The mask he had worn for a year, the flat, cold face of the quiet one, the face his own men had never seen crack, did the small, impossible thing. It softened. It did not break. It did not smile. It softened at the mouth and at the eyes, and Brittany, who had watched that face across a silver tray for 11 months, was the only person in the room who understood how much of him she had just been given. "Come," he said. She rose. The red gown moved with her the way it had been sewn to move. Her hand stayed in his. He led her, past his mother, past his grandmother, past Choi Da-eun's polite frozen face, past Naomi, who let herself grin now, past Chang-soo the old driver who had removed his flat cap and held it against his chest, past Lee Byung-chul at the door who did not move a single muscle of his face but who, when Brittany passed, gave the small formal chin drop he only gave to family. The band understood without being told. They lifted the tempo of the piece they had been holding low all evening, and the first 4 notes of a slow waltz found the marble floor. Junso stopped at the center of the ballroom. He turned to her. He put his right hand at the small of her back, the way a man puts his hand there when he does not intend to let go for a long time. He lifted his left hand. She placed her right hand in it, palm to palm, the way a woman places her hand in the hand of a man she has chosen back. Her left hand went to his shoulder. The signet ring on her hand, his ring, the platinum one he had slipped onto her 3rd finger over cold tea at 2 a.m. 3 days ago, and made her promise not to wear until tonight, caught the chandelier light and threw it, once, across the far wall. The room saw it. The room understood. They danced. He led badly at first, because he had not danced in a decade, and she smiled at him, close to his ear, and whispered, "You are counting." "I am." "Stop counting." He stopped counting. They moved together after that, the way people move together when the counting is gone. She rested her cheek against the shoulder of his black suit, just below the dragon at his neck. His hand at her back spread wider, held her closer. The room, which had watched him refuse to touch a woman in public for as long as most of them had known him, watched him hold this one as if she were the last warm thing in a cold house. Madame Haija, at the head table, put her hand over her mouth and did not take it away for a long time. Grandmother Okajah watched with her chin on the top of her cane, small and bright-eyed and satisfied, the way a general watches the end of a campaign she has quietly won. Naomi, at the back wall, wiped her face once with the back of her wrist and pretended it was the light. Chang-soo turned his flat cap over in his hands and smiled a slow, slow smile at the marble floor. Brittany closed her eyes. She thought, for one flash, of her mother in Newark, of the rent envelope, of the 11 months of walking these halls with her eyes on the parquet, of the woman in the staff mirror an hour ago whispering, "What if they humiliate me?" Of the answer the ballroom had given her, delivered by an old woman with a cane, and a mother with a burgundy hanbok, and a man with a dragon at his neck, who had just admitted, in front of his family, that he knew her dress size from memory. She opened her eyes. She lifted her face from his shoulder. She looked up at him. "Junso, yes, you knew your grandmother would find out. I hoped. You hoped. I could not walk you down that staircase alone against them. I needed her to laugh. If she laughed, they would follow." She laughed. Brittany let out a breath that had been in her chest since Newark. "You are not," she said, "the man they think you are. No, you are worse." He almost smiled. He did not. He tightened his hand at her back a fraction. "For you," he said. "Yes." The waltz turned them once more. His signet ring, warm now from her hand, rested against her shoulder blade. Her hand rested on the dragon at his neck. The chandeliers held their light on them the way chandeliers hold their light on the couple everyone has come to see, and the Kang family, seated and standing along the walls of the room she had cleaned for 11 months, watched the housemaid who had poured their tea dance with the master of their house, as if she had been born to stand exactly there. Grandmother Okja tapped her cane once against the marble. The band understood. They played on. Halfway through the second piece, Madame Heja rose from her chair and walked to Chang-Su along the wall. She lifted his flat cap out of his hands, set it gently on the small marble console beside him, and offered him her arm. The old driver stared at her as if she had asked him to lift a mountain. "Chang-Su," she said, "you have carried this family for 31 years. Dance with me." "Madame?" "Once, so that the room understands what kind of house this is." He took her arm. The band read the room again and lifted a second couple onto the floor. Chang-Su led with the stiff, careful steps of a man who had learned to waltz at a wedding 40 years ago and never used it since. Madame Hieja adjusted her pace to his. They turned once past Junso and Brittany, and Chang-Su, passing, gave Brittany the smallest bow a man can give without breaking rhythm. Brittany's eyes filled and she blinked them clear against Junso's shoulder. "He was the first person in this house who spoke to me by name," she whispered. "I know. You know. I asked him about you in March. He told me to leave you alone." She lifted her face. "He did?" He said, "That girl is holding her mother up in Newark, and you are not to make her life smaller. And you?" I listened. For 4 months. Then I stopped listening. She let her cheek drop back against his shoulder. Choi Da-eun stood at the edge of the ballroom. She waited long enough that no one could accuse her of leaving in shame. She lifted her red satin clutch. She crossed the floor at a pace that was neither slow nor fast. She stopped in front of Madame Hayaja, who had paused her dance to receive her, and she performed the small, polite bow of a woman conceding a match she had come to win. "Thank you for a memorable evening, Madame Kang." "Thank you for coming, Da-eun. I hope we will still—" "Of course we will," Madame Haija said, and both women understood that they would not. Da-eun turned. She passed the dancing couple at the center of the floor without looking at them. Lee Byung-chul at the door opened it for her. She stepped through. It closed. The room, which had been holding a small extra pocket of tension against her presence, released it all at once, and the music grew a little warmer without changing a single note. Grandmother Okja saw the whole exit from her chair. She smiled the way a cat smiles at a bird that has flown out of reach of its own choice. Han Mi-sun, near the wall, silver tablet still in her left hand, tilted the screen a 1/4 inch. She was already deleting a folder titled Choi, Contingency. She had made that folder in March. She had kept it updated. She closed it now, and closed her tablet, and put both hands neatly in front of her, and allowed herself, for the first time in 20 months of employment inside this house, a small private smile. Naomi crossed the ballroom. She did it without asking permission. She walked across the marble in her housemaid uniform with her braids in the low bun for work, and she stopped 3 steps from the dancing couple, and she waited. Junso saw her. He slowed. He turned Brittany a 1/4 turn so that Brittany could see her too. "Go," he said. Brittany let go of his hand. She crossed the 3 steps. Naomi caught her by both shoulders, held her at arm's length once to look at her in the red gown, and then pulled her in. They held each other for a long count. "You were a queen up there," Naomi said into her ear. "You told him my size." "I did." "You could have gotten fired." "He asked me nice." Brittany laughed. It was the first real laugh of her night. It shook out of her the way laughter shakes out of a person who has been carrying a stone for a year and just set it down. "Go back," Naomi said, releasing her. "That man is standing there like a statue waiting for you. Don't leave him standing." Brittany went back. Junso lifted his hand. She placed hers into it. His fingers closed around hers, and the signet ring pressed against her knuckle again. Warm now, the way a thing becomes warm when it has spent an hour on the right hand. The band moved into a third piece. Grandmother Okja, at her chair, closed her eyes for a moment, not from tiredness, from satisfaction. She had waited a long time to hear that band play 3 pieces in a row in this ballroom without a single person in the family looking at their watch. Junso bent his mouth to Brittany's ear. "Tomorrow morning." "Yes. I would like you to move your things out of the staff quarters." She lifted her face slowly. "Junso, not to my room, not yet. To the East Guest Suite. It has its own door to the garden. You will keep your own key. You will come and go as you decide. If you want your job back at the end of the week, my grandmother will give it back to you. If you do not, my mother will find you a role in the foundation she has been trying to staff for a year. You choose." She looked at him for a long moment. "You planned that too." "I planned the offer. I did not plan the answer." "The answer is the East Suite." "Good. And the foundation?" "Better." She smiled against his shoulder. Somewhere behind them, Grandmother Okja tapped her cane against the marble a second time, more softly, less command than blessing. And somewhere between the 4th and 5th turn, with her forehead against the collar of his shirt, and his hand steady at her back, and an entire family finally quiet in the good way, Brittany understood the thing the ballroom had already understood. She had not been let in. She had been called home. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever worn a uniform that made the room look through you, while you carried a secret that could rewrite everyone at the table? Have you ever loved someone whose family was supposed to destroy you, and chosen to stand up anyway? Who in your life was quietly filing every kind thing you did, waiting for the right night to defend you out loud? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, love, and hidden loyalty, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.